Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker with Maverick News, and I'm here with my co hosts who will now introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Brennan Kennedy, the co host for Maverick News.
And I'm Carla Olson.
And we are going to go straight tonight to a live news conference with Jen Psaki at the White House. Here we go. And this is all about Ukraine, folks, and we'll get to the convoy stuff very shortly, but let's listen in and see what Jen Psaki has to say.
But I will leave outside analysis to
And as you know, we are seeing Ukrainians flee the country.
Yeah.
Is the U.S. prepared to accept Ukrainian refugees?
We are, but we certainly expect that most, if not the majority, will want to go to Europe and neighboring countries. So we are also working with European countries on what the needs are, where there is capacity. Poland, for example, where we are seeing an increasing flow of refugees over the last 24 hours or so, of individuals, I should say, out of Ukraine, what their needs are, and we've been talking and engaging with European.
What you're doing is to prepare for the United States to accept.
The president is certainly prepared for that, but I would just note that because there are a number of European countries neighboring Ukraine who have expressed an openness to it, we would anticipate many of them would want to go to European countries.
And just one more quick question. The president, of course, has repeatedly said that American troops will not enter Ukraine. Yeah. Is there any scenario that's been discussed where that decision might be reconsidered?
The president has no intention of sending U.S. troops to fight in Ukraine. That has not changed. Go ahead.
This was asked of the president earlier, but I don't think we got a full answer. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin said that he warned if others are involved of such consequences that you have never encountered in your history. Does the U.S. understand that as a threat of using nuclear weapons?
Well, we can't obviously get into the mind of President Putin as much as he said that, nor do we know all the specific details about his strategic posture, but we don't see any increased threat in that regard at this point in time. Go ahead.
Just follow up on some of the cyber questions.
Sure.
I know that you and others have talked about how the government is on alert for the potential of a cyber attack, but can you share, are there any specific steps that are being taken that you can share that the U.S. is doing to protect the infrastructure, power grid, U.S. banks?
Well, I would say one, there's been efforts that have been ongoing for some time since the beginning of the administration to harden the private sector, or work with the private sector in partnership to harden their cybersecurity protections. We've actually seen a great deal of progress made in the financial sector. It's one of the stronger sectors in terms of protections from a cyber front that we see out there. So it's been ongoing for several months. Obviously, when there are moments like this where we continue to watch and look for what the potential is, we continue to engage closely with a range of industries about what they need to do, about the potential threats. And that's something that happens obviously privately and through a range of agencies. I can see if there's anything more specific that we can read out to all of you.
Just real quick, one follow-up. President Biden said that the U.S. is prepared if an attack comes there. He said prepared to respond. Would that response be a
cyber attack? Yes.
Would that be an equivalent cyber attack against Russia?
Well, I would say that the president reserves the option to respond in any manner of his choosing, overt or covert, seen or unseen, as we like to say in more available English. But I'm not going to get into specifics of what that looks like. He has a range of options. Go ahead.
Thanks. On oil prices and the SPR, does the administration have an oil price in mind that would trigger another release from the SPR?
I think not that we're going to get into detail or from here, JJ. I understand certainly the question. What you heard the president talk about today, and I can just reiterate a little bit, is that what has been ongoing, both from the president, who's been very engaged in this, having conversations with leaders in the Middle East and other parts of the world, as well as many members of his national security team, taking whatever steps we can to mitigate the impact on the global oil markets. And obviously that means increasing supply. Obviously a coordinated release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve would be part of that. But in terms of what that looks like or the specifics, I'm just not in a position to get into more details at this point.
Thanks. If the worst happens and Russia either reduces the flow of natural gas or cuts off energy altogether to Europe, does the administration have a good idea for how households in Europe could last under that kind of circumstance?
I don't have an assessment of that from here. I can certainly check with our economic team. One thing I will say that one of the steps we've been taking, obviously natural gas shortages and supply is an enormous regional issue, one that would hugely impact Europe more than here, of course. One of the steps we've been focused on and been taking is engaging with partners who may have excess LNG supply, like countries in Europe, Japan, for example, where we're planning to give them some, and now they're going to divert it to Europe. So we've been working to help mitigate any impact of a further invasion and a shortage in Europe. Go ahead.
Some of the activity that we've seen today in Ukraine, some of the clashes have been in and around Chernobyl. Does the United States have an assessment of the risk of a radioactive release?
So I do have one actual update on that as well. There's also been there was also a report out. So let me speak to this first, just so I don't forget, about hostages around there as well. So let me speak to that first. We are outraged by credible reports that Russian soldiers are currently holding the staff of the Chernobyl facilities hostage. This unlawful and dangerous hostage taking, which could upend the routine civil service efforts required to maintain and protect the nuclear waste facilities, is obviously incredibly alarming and greatly concerning. We condemn it and we request their release. In terms of a further assessment, I don't have anything more on that from here.
You gave a readout of how the president spent the past 24 hours or so. First, I wanted to ask about his call with President Zelensky. Did he indicate if he was still in Kyiv? Did he identify his location at this point?
We are aware of where he is located, and we are in touch with him. I would say on that call, what they discussed is President Zelensky's request for the president to condemn the actions of President Putin and the Russians, and to engage with other global leaders about it. And that's exactly what he's done.
A number of statements today from former presidents, President Obama, President Bush, and also saw former President Trump on television talking about this. Has the president, you mentioned during the Afghanistan drawdown, he had been in contact with his predecessors. Has he been in touch with any of his predecessors during this?
He has not been today.
And in terms of another domestic priority that was potentially included in his meetings today, given the situation, his time and focus and attention on the Supreme Court, on Ukraine, will this affect the timing of his Supreme Court announcement?
We are still on track to make an announcement before the end of the month. We have to do a lot of things around here at the same time. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on the cyber attacks and Article 5 question, I know you said that it's up to NATO to decide, but from a U.S. perspective, would any cyber attack against a NATO ally trigger Article 5, or would there be a measure for what counts?
Again, this is a conversation we would have with our NATO allies and partners. I don't have anything in addition to add to it.
Just to follow up on the Supreme Court, I know you said you're on track, but has he made a final decision, given there are basically 2 days left for the end of the month?
Not a final, and no job offer has been made. Go ahead.
Just a couple. Are there any concerns or indications at this point that Russia had prepared for the sanctions that you're putting in place and kind of developed preemptively ways to blunt that impact?
Well, it's an interesting question, and some of it is hard because it's hard to get into the minds of President Putin and the oligarchs around him. One of the steps we tried to take is to, as we were contemplating the individuals we were going to sanction, we sanctioned family members as well, because what we've seen, the tactics they've used in the past is they've moved money around and resources around to family members, and we tried to address that on the front end. In terms of the banking and the financial sector, I mean, it accounts for such a large percentage of how they do business it would be a difficult thing for them to plan and plot against. And if you look to just even the anticipation of the potential sanctions, as Dilip was mentioning, the ruble is the worst performing currency in the world right now. Their inflation has skyrocketed. So we're even seeing in their markets the anticipated impact even before today, and that's even before the actual squeeze on the financial sector in the country. So it feels to me it would be a little hard to plan around and plot around, given the significance of what was done today and the fact that when we sanctioning 10 of Russia's financial institutions and these export control measures, which essentially cuts President Putin off from semiconductors and access to a range of technology he wants for the future. Those are difficult things to plan ahead for.
I guess secondly, does the administration have any assessment for how China is reacting to this at this point? Whether they are willing to provide support to Russia, how much, and has there been any kind of contact there to kind of attempt to move them off of any support?
Well, in terms of what impact they can have, I mean, China only accounts for about 15% of China and Russia. I'm not sure. You can double check me on this. About 15% of the global economy. If you look at G7 partners in the U.S. and Europe, it's about 50%, right? So they cannot cover what the impact of the sanctions that have been announced in coordination with Europe how they would impact Russia. You know, I think from our perspective as it relates to China, well, I can't get into the heads of what their thinking is. You know, this is a moment for China, for any country, to think about what side of history they want to stand on here. And, you know, that is certainly the case that we would make publicly and privately. I think you saw that Secretary Blinken spoke with his counterpart just a couple of days ago. You know, the president's certainly open to speaking with his counterpart, but I don't have any prediction of that at this point in time or a timeline. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Over the past couple of weeks, as you've been sounding the alarm on this, you've put the sanctions package together, conducted diplomacy with the Russians and the rest of the world. How did the Ukrainian government use that time, since they've been initially warned that this was a likelihood? Did they use that time wisely to prepare?
Tell me more about what you mean exactly.
Well, you're seeing reports from the streets in Russia in Ukraine of people being surprised. You had obviously local and national leadership in Ukraine telling people to stay calm, to go to work, even the day before the invasion began. So were they properly prepared, and was there more that they could have done in the lead-up?
Look, I think it's not particularly constructive for us to give an assessment of that. What I can tell you is that our focus has been on providing up-to-date, what has turned out to be quite accurate and transparent information about what the President Putin was preparing to do, which was invade Ukraine. And we have been very clear with American citizens who are there. We have been clear with our European partners 4 months now, including Ukrainian leadership. So that has been what our focus.
Why don't we
has been.
drop the audio on
and,
this
you
and
know,
start
we
a
will
discussion,
remain a strong
Brendan?
Supporter and partner of,
it's on your answer.
President Zelensky in
Oh,
Ukraine moving
that's
forward.
right.
Go ahead.
Following up on the sanction question.
Yeah.
We have heard for weeks that these sanctions were at least in part a part of a strategy that was based
Well,
on
let's listen to the sanctions.
prevention. Today,
Because
with
we'll
the
be
president's
talking about
comment
that.
that no one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. Moving forward, do you expect this slate of sanctions to prevent any further advancement or aggression from Russia?
Well, I would say that later in the back and forth or the press avail, he also said when asked if sanctions cannot stop President Putin, what penalty can? And he said, I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him, which leads me to believe that's not exactly what he meant. He also went on to say the threat of sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of sanctions are two different things. And the way we look at this, broadly speaking, and Dilip touched on this a little bit, is that we do see them as having a deterrent impact, right? It doesn't mean they're 100% foolproof. But if there's a 95% chance of Russia invading without the threat of sanctions, and there's a 60, I'm making up these percentages just to make a point, but and a 65% chance that they will with them, you're obviously going to go with the threat of sanctions because you want to reduce the threat of an invasion. So there is a deterrent, and we've seen the deterrent impact work at times, right? I'd also note that we are very clear-eyed about the fact that President Putin, not just a few days ago, I mean, he gave the speech a few days ago where he questioned the legitimacy of Ukraine as a sovereign country. He's also talked about how the breakup of the Soviet Union was the worst thing that's happened, that's a paraphrase, in recent, in decades of history. So we are clear-eyed about his ambition, but what the other part of it that we are quite focused on is the consequences. And the way we see it is, as we've touched on a little bit, inflation skyrocketing, the ruble is the worst performing currency in the world. It was his decision to go to war. It's our choice to make him pay a price. Same with the global community. And we believe these consequences are also going to have an impact.
Just at the risk of repeating your question as well, I mean, did also say...
Okay, I'll just throw it over to you guys and get your initial thoughts on everything going on.
Go ahead, Brendan. I'm just catching up. Honestly, so much is happening every minute. I'm just catching up.
Well, last night I basically saw
in many
a
senses,
tweet
there
from
were-
the Gutfeld show pop up and said our show tonight is canceled due to breaking news happening in the Ukraine, and my stomach just kind of sunk. I'm kind of on the fence about what we should be doing about this. I don't really quite know what the answer is. I do feel that whatever Russia is doing is not in the best interest of people, and a lot of people are getting hurt already. There's going to be a lot more people to get hurt out of this situation. It's not going to be pretty at all. This is going to be something that we haven't seen in a long time. All these sanctions that they keep talking about, though, are just a waste of time. We've had sanctions in place since 2014. It's just a bunch of blah, 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 blah. Like, this has been happening since Crimea, after the Sochi Olympics. It didn't deter anything then. It's not going to deter anything now. President Vladimir Putin is pushing forward already. So, I mean, I don't think this is going to change his mind. He has a lot of allies that he can rely on. He can rely on China, Iran, Afghanistan, so on and so forth. This is a big mess, and to be honest, we don't have the administration here in the West to deal with any of this properly anyway, nor do we have the military might to answer anything that has to do with this, I don't think.
So, this is really dangerous.
Yeah, big time.
And it's not the U.S. and its allies going into Iraq or Afghanistan or some other country like Vietnam. This puts, if this escalates, this means we go toe-to-toe with the number 2 superpower in the world. And I don't want to see that happen. And we need to step back, I think, and really think this through and take everything the media is telling us with a real grain of salt. Because I don't think we can trust one syllable that comes out of the mouths of the legacy media. And I think we need to remember that Joe Biden and his son were in deep and well connected in Ukraine before the last presidential election. The media chose to cover all that crap up by ignoring it. And we know that Hunter Biden was being paid a huge sum of money every year by an oil company in Ukraine. We know that the Ukrainian government is corrupt. We know that it's not really a democracy. We know that the president of Ukraine has imprisoned his political opponent. And this is a country that we want to oppose or defend against an invasion from Russia. I think that we need to really sit back and step back and ask why Russia really wants to invade or why they invaded. And I don't think that the reasons being given on ABC and CNN and CTV and CBC are the real reasons. Honestly, I haven't been watching those networks today because I don't trust them anyway. And I think that it's all propaganda. But I have an idea of what they're likely to be saying. And they're saying probably things like Vladimir Putin wants to reunite the Ukraine because he sees it as a country that belongs to Russia, and he's upset because the former Soviet Union broke up and it's part of Russia and he wants it back. And I've seen things online where people are talking about the resources there, the uranium and the coal, and that's why it's so important and all of these things. But here's what I think. And I don't think I'm alone, but I might be in the minority on this because I don't think that people really see this for what it is. NATO wants to make Ukraine part of NATO. They want to make it a member country. If they do that, they put weapons right on the doorstep of Russia. It's not much different than the Cuban Missile Crisis from a Russian perspective. It's not much different than the situation the United States faced when Russia was trying to install missiles, and actually did install missiles, deliver them to Cuba in the 1960s. And Kennedy said, no way, we're not going to let that happen. And then we ended up with the Cuban Missile Crisis because that would have given Russia first strike capability. And
well, actually, it should be a footnote there that's the exact reason why we had the Cuban Missile Strike crisis, because Kennedy was planning and was doing the same thing in Eastern Europe at the time.
And so here we go. Like, and Putin has said, and I heard a quote last night on one of the major U.S. networks, where they quoted Putin saying that he didn't want Ukraine to become a NATO member. So that is, I think, the main concern for Russia and Vladimir Putin. And I don't think he wanted to go in. I don't think he really wanted to invade. But I think he sees this as the only way to prevent the United States and its allies from going in there and making Ukraine a NATO member and making it a real threat to Russia. The United States had an opportunity, I think, through negotiations and diplomacy and the West, but mostly the United States, had an opportunity to negotiate to keep that country neutral. But that time has now passed. That opportunity is gone. And so now we get this. And I don't know if Vladimir Putin even really wants to keep Ukraine. It's going to be a bit of a struggle for him because, as I understand it, they're arming citizens and spreading guns around all through the country to make resistance something that's going to hurt the Russians over a period of time. So it's not going to be as simple, I don't think, for a simple matter of the Russians going in with brute force. I think they're going to have to pick away at this, and it could get really messy. I mean, who knows how it's going to play out? The Russians have all the firepower, but and the other problem is the United States, NATO, they've emboldened Ukraine. Biden has emboldened them. I think he's
Trudeau has too.
Yes,
I was just going to say Trudeau has too.
I think they're giving the Ukrainian government and President Zelensky a false sense of security. Because the truth is, I don't think there's much that the United States, NATO, I don't think there's a whole lot they can really do. Because if they do, we're going to be into like a major conflict that is extremely risky with an adversary that we don't really want to be messing with. We do not. And let's not forget that this thing would be led by the United States and a president who can barely remember his own name.
The doctor is. Did you see that the presidential doctor is calling for a cognition test for him? Ordering it.
I've been a little out of the loop today on
Me
that
too.
front, but
that's a few weeks back now.
So
happened,
I didn't know. Okay,
I just found it today, and I'm like, it's about time.
But that's the reality of it. I mean, he's the commander in chief. I don't think I would want to be following that guy into battle. And look at how this is a guy who couldn't even handle a withdrawal from Afghanistan properly. If he can't handle that and can't get that done properly, why would we trust him to go into battle or to confront Vladimir Putin and the Russian army? The number 2 superpower in the world. You want to put your faith in that? So I'll ask. We should ask the people in the audience tonight. Who here wants to send their sons and daughters over there to fight and follow Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau into battle? Oh, they stay home. They send your kids over. Who wants to send their kids? Any takers?
Laura says, but Rick, climate change. The true adversary.
Yeah, well, that
Clint,
this brings me to a point that I've said for a long time. Okay, that's beautiful. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay,
here we go. I'm sitting back.
Climate change, they say, is the greatest existential threat to mankind. I beg to differ. I think maybe global thermonuclear war might be a little bit riskier. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is frightening.
And that's what I've been afraid of, for a long time. Carbon dioxide, the plants will take care of that. Okay. They'll consume it and give us back oxygen. But radioactive fallout might be a little harder to deal with. And we have a video. I have a video queued up here outlining the military power, how much NATO has, how much Russia has. Yeah, nuclear weapons, bigger threat to humanity and the world than climate change.
And I believe Vladimir Putin has pointed out that if the West does try to intervene on this situation, that they will, I can't remember the exact words. I can't find an English dub version of his speech, but I was able to find a what do you call it? Like a transcript of the speech. Yep. But I think that will probably bore everybody to death. But he did say that any Western nation that intervenes will experience immediate consequences. Vladimir Putin did say under the Trump days that they'd have the capability to send a missile to Washington, D.C. in a matter of minutes.
They have the world's only hypersonic missile. They can deliver a missile to the United States in minutes.
Wow.
Guys, this is a wake-up call. Okay? And all this, here's the other thing about climate change. All this climate change talk, just all the talk and the rhetoric and the BS surrounding all of that could kill us right now. That could kill us, because as a result of all of that rhetoric and all of that climate change, we have allowed people on the left side of the political spectrum and all the climate change alarmists to convince us to, and not even convinced, they've just done it. They've gutted our energy production. And that makes us weak. It has weakened our economy. It has weakened us militarily. It has weakened the country, period. And now we're going to pay for it at the pump. We're going to pay for it in higher costs to heat our homes, to run our factories, as this conflict in Ukraine escalates. Because the Russians, they haven't cut back on their energy production. The Chinese haven't cut back on their energy production. They're still building coal plants while we shut ours down. We have got to be the stupidest people on the face of the planet. Just plain dumb. Stupid, stupid, stupid. We shot ourselves in the foot. And people here also have a false sense of security. For too long, we've lived under the security of the nuclear umbrella. We've been insulated geographically from Europe, Russia, by the oceans, and Asia and other countries. We North America, Canada, the United States, Mexico, we've been insulated. We have those oceans, have had those oceans to protect us for a long time. But the world has become a much smaller place. And now these conflicts like this one are much closer to home. Hypersonic missiles, cyber attacks. And what have we done? We've weakened ourselves. We overestimate our capabilities at this point, and I'm sure we are underestimating the strength and capabilities of the Russian military. I think our military is in a sad, sad state. Canada, we'd be wise to just stay out of it because we don't have much of a military. I think the goons that they sent to attack people in Ottawa, the peaceful protest, I think that's about the largest military force we have. So if they really want to make a stand over there, they should probably round up all those guys and send them over with their billy clubs and tear gas canisters.
And their LRAD.
Yeah, and their LRAD machine. They were pretty effective. Yeah, they know how to beat the crap out of people.
Rick, you've touched on something that's very important to note there. So 2 things. Number 1, Russia is actually on Canada's back door. They are just over the pole, and if anything comes out of Russia, it's coming over that pole and going straight to either Canada or the United States. Number 2, when it comes to our Canadian military specifically, Canada has a long-standing history of not paying frick all for their military until time of crisis. World War I, no military. They scraped it all together at the drop of a hat. World War II, no military. They scraped it all together at the top of a hat. The Korean conflict, that was all World War II surplus. So on and so forth. Like, our military has always been neglected in times of peace, and we're going to pay for that now. Like, it's not good because the forces of China, Iran, and Russia, they all work together, and they don't have any woke ideological agendas to follow. They're just going to go forward and say, hey, we need more energy. Okay, we'll just build more coal plants. Who cares?
Yeah, and as you know, that's the other thing about all these climate change people, okay? All these governments around the world run by basically international gangsters, right? Pick your country, it doesn't matter. They're all just a bunch of gangsters. They're all out there flying around, flying their supersonic fighter jets and burning jet fuel, firing off missiles, steaming around out there in nuclear-powered ships and submarines, carrying nukes all over the place, and they blow crap up. They put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere with one shell from a tank than you burn. Probably a city burns in fuel all year with all the cars, like in a city of 100,000 people. They blow one thing up and it's carbon dioxide everywhere. Like, freaking ridiculous. This is so dangerous. We need to, and for what? For Ukraine? For what? What interests do we have over there? What real interests do we have? It's just, let's go in there and piss off Putin. Let's turn it into a NATO country and park some weapons over there. That'll piss him off.
Yep. Although I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I am divided in the sense that it's a bit of a bully move, and there's a lot of people who are going to get hurt. And I could show you some footage here right now, actually.
Sure.
It's going to be so bloody. It's going to be real messy.
It already is.
Well, if we go in, but that's the thing. Biden, Mr. Tough Guy, he's going to take on Putin like he took on Corn Pop, right? So, and he said he wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to take nothing from Putin. No, because he's going to deal with him like Corn Pop, and because Biden's one tough guy. He's a real tough guy. Have you seen his shades? You seen
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
aviators?
The
man?
aviators. Aviators, yeah.
He's one cool dude. He's so cool. He's so smooth. Oh yeah, and he's just gonna tell Putin right. And I love this phrase when he says it all the time. He says, and I told him right to his face. He says, I told him right to his face. Ooh, he's so tough. He told him right to his face. Wow, Biden told him right to his face. Mom, President Biden told him right to his face. He's tough. He's a real tough president, not like Trump. Trump was Putin's puppet, but not Biden. No, he told him right to his face. He said, "Don't you dare go into Ukraine. Don't you dare."
Come on, man.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Don't you go into Ukraine. I told him right to his face.
Don't do it.
You know what he's doing right now? He ain't telling Putin nothing to his face because he ain't got nothing to tell him.
Actually,
he's impotent.
Believe it or not, Biden had deliberately insulted Vladimir Putin just after the election, and Vladimir Putin challenged him to a one-on-one conversation in a public interview format, and he did the same thing. Then when Joe Rogan had said, Biden and Trump should do a 2-hour conversation with Joe Rogan, see what happens. He turned it down. He said, no, can't do that, because everybody knows he's weak and he's a puppet.
What's he gonna do if he goes in there, man? It's like it would be the dumbest military move ever to go into Ukraine and go toe to toe with the Russians, in my opinion. I'm not a general, but from my perspective, this is just a bunch of BS from a weak president and a weak prime minister. It's a lot of tough talk from two really weak, small men. And where's the moral high ground on this? Who has the moral high ground? Justin Trudeau, the guy who's throwing his political opponents in jail, the guy who sent in his goons to go beat his own people in the streets not even a week ago? Yeah, he's got the moral high ground, that guy. The guy who stripped everyone of their rights by invoking the Emergencies Act, the War Measures Act. The guy who acts like a freaking teenager. Our immature, little, small prime minister. Oh, yeah, let's get some tough talk from that guy. Yeah, he's the guy I want to follow. What a moron. Yeah, Justin Trudeau wants to send your sons and daughters over there to die. Canada? How much time would the Canadian military buy him over there, do you think, Brendan? Like 10 minutes? Before they got wiped out?
I think they'd be wiped out the second they step foot.
I wouldn't say. I don't know. The Canada military has a means of surprising people, so I wouldn't throw them in the garbage so easily. But at the same time,
they don't have any equipment.
At the same time, they are under-equipped. They are probably under-trained.
It's their leadership.
Oh, and also they're all jabbed, so they'd probably all die on the way over there in the plane trip due to some sort of heart issue or something or other.
And you know, guys, like here's the other big problem: it's the media. Okay, the people on the left have been wanting to go to war with Russia since before Donald Trump got into office.
Yeah.
And the focal point for a long time was Syria, because Russia was backing the government of Syria, and the United States wanted to destabilize Syria, the Syrian government, and there was just so much crap going on in Syria. They wanted to go to war in Syria so bad against the Russians. It was just, and the propaganda that was swirling around at that time. I was watching the images. Remember that the photo of the young boy in the back of the ambulance in Syria? Do you remember that? I'll try to find that and show it to you tonight. Like, that was a propaganda shot. There was so much propaganda. And then Trump got in the way, and he brought peace to the Middle East. and they hated that because they wanted to go to war so bad. Everything's been Russia, 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 Russia. It's the media. The biggest problem here right now is that ask anybody, just go walk down the street and just stop a few people and say, where is Ukraine? Can you show me Ukraine on a map? Who's the president of Ukraine? Why do you think we should go to battle? Why do you think we should defend Ukraine? Why do we need to? Ask them anything about Ukraine. People don't even know anything about Ukraine here unless they're from Ukraine, right? Unless they have family there or background, and maybe they've moved to Canada from there, or their families from there.
Yeah.
So and I understand that, but the reality is, more people here didn't know anything about it, and now everybody's a damn expert. Because why? Because they were watching CNN. And CNN says we should go bomb them, so I guess we should do that. Because I was watching Morning Joe at MSNBC, and he says that we have to defend our democracy. Because if we don't defend our democracy, we won't have any democracy left. So we better do something about that, because we gotta have democracy. We have to defend our democracy by going toe-to-toe with the Russians over Ukraine. Yeah, so send your sons and daughters. Better yet, here's a question. Who wants to lace up their combat boots and head off to Ukraine with a few friends and some shotguns to go get involved in a standoff with Vladimir Putin and his boys? Who wants to go? Who's volunteering? Ask yourself if you would go yourself before you send somebody's son or daughter to go do this.
No, I wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
But with that being said, let's roll this here clip, and then so this is down in a subway station in Ukraine, and people are currently hiding out from bombardment.
These people are petrified, and rightly so, right? I'm scared for them.
I heard from a friend who has a friend in Ukraine that the mothers are actually putting on the labels of the back labels of the children's clothing their blood type. So you're sending your kid to school, labeling their clothing with their blood type because you're that afraid. Could you imagine?
So do we have Justin Trudeau's news conference? Do we know what?
Yeah, I have it ready.
Our fearless leader. What does he have to say?
I have it ready to roll.
I mean, his country is a disaster. He has no business putting his business in any other country at this point. We're in shambles.
Oh, Canada, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't. That's the other thing.
He can't defend his own country and his own citizens. How is he going to go and defend others?
You know what he's using this for? A distraction.
An absolute
distraction. Big time. You know what, though? I really think that, all sarcasm and jokes aside here, that I feel bad for the people of Ukraine. I really do. But like Rick said, when it comes to these types of conflicts, the media does use a lot of propaganda, and they do use a lot of things that are going to tear at your heartstrings. Whenever you're seeing media that is trying to move you or manipulate you to feel a certain way, you need to ask yourself a question. Why do I feel this way?
When they start rolling out pictures of kids covered in soot that have been, half blown up, you can spot some of the things that are, propaganda. It's just they make no mistake, they're manipulating people's minds right now in order to manufacture consent.
This is why I'm so absolutely terrified, because I am seeking the truth. I don't know where to look.
Yeah.
So that I can make sense of all of this and even comment effectively or with any intellect on this.
Don't forget that this is a media that lied about the Russia hoax, and that's a verifiable fact. So don't even start, all you, okay? Because it's true that it was all a hoax. There never was any stupid Russia collusion between Trump and Vladimir Putin. It's verifiable fact now. Go do your homework, okay? So they lied about that. They covered up the Hunter Biden Ukraine scandal. They've covered up Joe Biden's corruption in Ukraine, and all the money that was flowing back and forth. They've lied about so many things. We've shown them for the past month the lies that they've been spewing out of Ottawa and the truckers' convoy, so that they could paint all truckers in the country as a bunch of racist Nazis. Lie, 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 lie. And so are you going to believe them now? If you're sitting at home watching television and just taking in the information that they're feeding you from CTV, CBC, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, PBS, TVO, you just let that into your brain without thinking about any of it critically. It's like, yeah, got to defend our democracy. Got to defend democracy. Defend the democracy.
Yeah.
To me, yeah, and this is where the challenge is for me. It's going to take me days to seek out the actual truth so that I can form an actual opinion on anything with this.
And the Russians.
I'm with you, Carla. I'm not sure. I think the biggest failure right now for the common person is not looking at Vladimir Putin and what he is saying, because he's not just going off of, oh, gee, that Ukraine over there, I really need that. I really need that. That's a stupid way to think, to not think that, we'll see it on this press conference here, exactly what I'm talking about. So this was at about noon today. This is our supreme fearless leader, Justin Trudeau. Oh.
Let everyone remember he's still at war with his own citizens too.
That's right. He's such
Freeland,
a compassionate.
He's very busy.
Compassionate leader he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's going to defend. He's going to defend democracy. Here he comes. Look, check what socks he has on today. I want to know. Are we going to roll this, Brendan, or what's going on? Brendan? Are we frozen?
I'm not. Is Brendan frozen?
He looks frozen to me.
He does. Breathing, Brendan?
He's freeze-dried.
I'm thinking about our prime minister. He's like the abusive husband that beats the crap out of his wife day in and day out. But then he's out somewhere and he sees a man misspeaking to his own sin and tries to correct that man. That's exactly what he's doing here.
Yep. It's just...
and he's actually worse.
He has become a dictator unto himself, right?
Unbelievable. Narcissistic.
And now he's preaching.
Right.
Preaching to Vladimir. Preaching to the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Preaching to all the countries around the world, and virtue signaling. Our dictators preaching to their dictator. He's part of the dictators club now.
Telling that dictator that he's a dictator, just the way he was calling us, Nazi terrorists.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. We're in a lot of trouble. We are.
We certainly are.
Yeah. Not me. I don't want to go fight over in Ukraine. Not me. We are going to get to some convoy news tonight as well, because we know that a lot of people are tuning in for all of that. And the People's Convoy in the U.S. is
I bow my head in humbleness to what you guys did up there. I don't have the word.
continuing tonight. So while Brendan kind of gets figure, I don't know if he realizes he's not
No, he
in
would
the
know.
broadcast. He'll be
Last
back.
night that happened to me. I kept losing. I missed
Yeah.
so much last night because it was happening.
Yeah, so this is the People's Convoy right now. And these guys, inspired by the Canadian Freedom Convoy, we now have tens of thousands of truckers rolling across the United States on their way to Washington, D.C. And I believe the destination, they'll reach their destination, I believe, around March 5th.
So there's been talk that, and it's expected that the Biden administration is completely ready, that their people are ready for the arrival of these trucks. And I heard that they had some military?
National Guard.
The National Guard, for over 400 National Guard waiting for them. So, I mean, my heart hurts for this convoy because I know that they're going with the same intention to bring forth that same spirit that we had in Ottawa. They're going with the best intentions, only to be met with the same force that we had at the end of ours.
Yeah, who knows how that's going to play out? But yeah, it's
because I mean, let's face it, President Biden or whoever's leading President Biden is no better than Justin Trudeau. I mean, neither of them.
Yeah,
it's frightening.
Sorry about that. My net kicked out. I have.
Okay, we'll come back to the whole story surrounding the convoys in Canada, the aftermath of the beatdown from the police goons, and all the stuff going on with the People's Convoy. We'll have more on that, very shortly. But let's pick up the coverage of the situation in Ukraine with our fearless leader, Little Potato, the one, the only.
His pants are too long. Can't see the socks today.
There he is, the big PM himself.
Everyone keep your eye on Crystalline Freeland.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être ici. Yeah. Je suis accompagné aujourd'hui de la vice-première ministre Freeland et des ministres Joly et Anand. On est ici aujourd'hui pour parler de la situation en Ukraine. L'attaque injustifiable de la Russie contre l'Ukraine est inacceptable. This morning, Ukrainians woke up to the brutal, terrifying reality of war. President Putin has launched a horrific, unprovoked attack on their country, a sovereign nation, including missile strikes in their capital, Kiev. He has needlessly put the lives of innocent people at risk, violated Russia's international treaties, and launched the greatest threat to European stability since World War II. Canada is unequivocal in our condemnation of Russia's unprovoked and unjustified attack on the sovereign, democratic state of Ukraine. President Putin's brazen disregard for international law, democracy, and human life are a massive threat to security and peace around the world. I just spoke a few minutes ago with President Zelensky. I told him that we are announcing strong action today and continue to stand with him and with the Ukrainian people. Earlier this morning, I met with G7 partners to coordinate our response. We're also working closely with NATO and our allies. Together, we have made clear that Russian violence, aggression, and violation of international law will not go unpunished. We stand united and steadfast in our support of Ukraine's sovereignty, and we stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people's right to decide their own future in a free and democratic state. Mardi, après la reconnaissance par le président Poutine des soi-disant États indépendants de Donetsk et Luhansk, le Canada a annoncé une première série de sanctions concertées Les sanctions du Canada
Let's just
ciblent
drop
les
the audio a little
responsables
bit,
des
audio,
actions illégales de la
Brendan,
Russie,
while we.
ainsi que deux banques.
He's doing the French.
You see, he's picked up a few words from the convoy, standing united in solidarity. Impressive. He learned a thing or two.
Why didn't he call Biden or Putin a racist? You know,
he's defending their democracy.
It's funny, whenever Chrystia Freeland turns her head sideways, she looks like a bird.
To me, she looks like she's having neurological issues.
What? It's there is definitely
like a
something
twitch.
wrong. It's like it's constant, and it's in every news conference.
These sanctions will target
that's why I always say,
58
pay close
individuals and
attention to her.
entities, including members of the Russian elite and their family members, as well as the Wagner Group and major Russian banks, among others. We will also sanction members of the Russian Security Council, including the Defense Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Justice Minister. In addition, effective immediately, we are ceasing all export permits for Russia and canceling existing permits. These sanctions are wide-reaching. They will impose severe costs on complicit Russian elites, and they will limit President Putin's ability to continue funding this unjustified invasion. Aujourd'hui, suite à la frappe militaire irresponsable et dangereuse de opposition to the democratic principles that generations of Canadians have fought to protect, democracies and democratic leaders everywhere must come together to defend these principles and stand firmly against authoritarianism. Russia must immediately cease all hostile actions against Ukraine and withdraw all military and proxy forces from the country. Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected, and the Ukrainian people, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. I want to be clear.
Sorry, I think I just threw up in my
is
mouth a
not
little
with
bit.
the people of Russia. It is with President Putin and Russian leadership that has enabled and supported this further invasion of Ukraine. La vérité, c'est que la Russie viole la souveraineté de l'Ukraine depuis des années. You are not alone. We are standing with you. Canadians and permanent residents in Ukraine,
I don't think
your
he's,
safety and security are now our top priority. We also want to make sure that you can get to safety. We've arranged for safe.
It kind of reminds me of whenever there's an international disaster, people are like, "We stand with you," and then they put like a fancy cover on portrait cover on their Facebook. It's like, "There, see, I'm supporting you."
Safe passage for you and your families at the land borders with Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. We are urgently issuing travel documents for affected Canadians, permanent residents, and their immediate family members. We're also prioritizing immigration applications for Ukrainians who want to come to Canada. And to ensure we can serve people as quickly as possible, today we are launching a new dedicated phone line for anyone at home or abroad with urgent Ukraine-related immigration questions. Aux Canadiens et aux résidents permanents du Canada qui se trouvent
Andrew
en
says,
Ukraine,
"How dare you?
votre santé et votre
We're sending
sécurité
Greta.
sont notre
Putin will
priorité
weep."
absolue. On a pris des mesures avec l'Ukraine.
We totally
I just,
should.
Last
I
night,
just find it
I
interesting
spoke
that
with
he's,
Ukrainian Canadians at
offering
the
political
Ukrainian
asylum
Canadian Congress board
to
meeting.
Ukrainians,
I told
while
them
other
that
countries are
President
offering
Putin
us
has
political asylum from him.
underestimated the strength and unity of democratic allies and partners, and he has underestimated the strength and resolve of Ukrainian people. These are traits of Ukrainian Canadians, too. You have helped build this country. You are proud of your country, your culture, and your heritage, and you don't back down. Well, neither will Canada. Our support for Ukraine, for democracy, and for human rights remains unwavering. Merci beaucoup. Je passe maintenant la parole à la vice-première
Okay,
ministre,
let's
Chrystia
just
Freeland.
Get rid of it.
Oh, jeez. He's a tough guy. He's a tough guy. We're not going to back down. We're not gonna back. He's so tough. Justin Trudeau.
You guys
He's
pay
the
attention
man.
to
He's
pay
the
attention
man.
to this COVID violation that's happening right now. To take the mask off, they put it on the podium, and then they touch the podium after everybody else put their dirty mask on the podium and then touched the podium.
Super spreader event.
Yep.
I like her duck mask. You know, she looks like a
Merci,
duck.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, et bon après-midi. Quand nous nous sommes réveillés ce matin, le monde était différent. La Russie, a country of more than 40 million people who have sought nothing but peace and freedom. The horrific human costs of this cruel invasion are the direct and personal responsibility of Vladimir Putin, who has chosen to invade a sovereign democracy and challenge the rules-based international order. History will judge President Putin as harshly as the world condemns him today.
What about you guys?
Today, he cements
Does she
his
not see the
place
parallel?
in the ranks of the reviled European dictators who caused such carnage in the 20th century. The response by Canada and our allies will be swift, and it will bite. This
Ooh,
barbaric
she's tough
attack
too.
cannot
Real tough.
and will not be allowed.
Stop. Can we
to
pause it for
succeed.
just a moment?
Yeah.
I think she might find it's a little more difficult to
She
hurt.
can't stand still for a second.
Yeah, to inflict financial pain on the Russians than it was on the truckers. Might just be a little more difficult. But she got good practice in on her own people, and they
Yeah.
still are. You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry. Just go ahead.
That's okay. It was a worthy point of worth making there.
It was.
To my own Ukrainian Canadian community, let
Which
me
one?
say
Stop!
this.
Stop!
Now-
The Nazi ones from her own family, or the other ones, who are the good Ukrainians? Because it was her grandfather who was the Nazi in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, like Poland and area, I believe it was reported by the Ottawa Citizen in 2017. He was a propaganda worker for the Nazi Party. Furthermore, may interest you guys, but the Canadian military had discussions with a quote-unquote Nazi group that actually is in Ukraine and is pretty much verifiable Nazis. And they have armed them, and essentially they'll be a part of Ukrainian defense.
Yeah. Okay. Let's let her talk.
Now is the time for us to be strong as we support our friends and family in Ukraine. Now is the time for us to remember ще не вмерла Україна. И моим друзьям в России я хочу сказать прямо и четко. Наша ссора не с российским народом, а с президентом Путиным и с теми, кто его окружают и поддерживают. С теми, кто сделал кровавый выбор атаковать суверенную.
Okay. Let's stop. You know what?
That's enough of that anyway.
You can take what she said, what Chrystia Freeland says, straight to the bank, because that comes right from the wicked witch of the West herself. Yeah, you can take that to the bank.
Big time. So, what is everybody's thoughts? Do sanctions work against Russia, or is Russia doing just fine?
Sorry, Brendan, what was that? Will sanctions work? Is that the question?
Yeah, is this? I think that these sanctions are going to backfire, and it's just going to cause everything to become really expensive.
Right. I think it's happening now, Brendan.
We saw the same thing in 2014 when they put sanctions on pork products being exported to Russia. Pork products in Canada skyrocketed in price. that's one of the things I specifically remember. We are treating our energy sector like it's replaceable with green energy, but it's not replaceable with green energy. And so now we're going to see probably in Ontario gas prices go up to about $2 in a matter of weeks, I would say, or no time at all.
I am jealous of Biden. He has a really cool plane. He used to fly around in it and stuff. It's got lots of TVs.
And he wears his glasses on the plane.
Oh, he looks so cool.
He is cool. And sniffing all the children.
And Rick Rick hasn't had a chance to contend with Corn Pop either, so he's pretty upset about that.
Yeah. Well,
who is Corn Pop anyway?
Yeah.
You don't know who Corn Pop is?
No.
Well, there's a whole thing where Biden was, for a long time ago, he made comments. He was telling this story about when he was younger, and he was trying to make everybody think he was a real tough guy. And it was about how he stood down this tough dude named Corn Pop. I'll see if I can find the clip for you. It's just
okay. So Corn Pop isn't actually a verifiable person, is what you're saying.
Sounds like Corn Pop, someone from his past.
It is. It's from when he was a kid.
Some kid that bullied him, they called him Corn Pop.
Yeah, the kid.
That's what it sounds like, anyway.
Okay, no, I've heard the story. I just
And
thought
so he told him to his face.
I thought Corn Pop was like a real dude that I don't know. Biden's probably making it up so he can sound like a tough guy. I do recall during the election, he basically said to Trump, he's like, "I'll take you out back."
To Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, well, Biden's just like
demented.
He's
I
just
am a nurse. I know dementia. I watch him, and he's demented. And Chrystia Freeland either is struggling with guilt, anxiety, or some neurological issue.
It's something serious, I think. But
There's something very wrong.
Here's Biden in the Corn
God
Pop
bless
story.
his soul.
Okay, Joe, let her rip.
I learned a lot. And I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and there were not, it was a 3-meter board. And you fell off.
And look how he's got his shirt unbuttoned all the way down so you could see his masculine chest hair.
Off sideways, you landed on the damn.
Because the cement pond was right over there, and that's where I seen Corn Pop. Anyway, hang on.
I can't even keep
let's
it
back
together.
her up a little bit, and we'll get the tale of Corn Pop right from the commander-in-chief himself. Oh, look how sexy he is with his shirt unbuttoned like that.
It makes a difference. This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and there were not, it was a 3-meter board. And you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there.
Yeah, because it's a cement pond right over there.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
I gotta hear that again.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you. Off the board. I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was
All
the
the
mechanic.
cement ponds.
And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where mechanics, where all the pool filter is. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, "You walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'" I said, "You kidding me?" He said, "No, if you don't come back." And he was right. So I walked out with the chain, and I walked up to my car, and those days used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart, then. I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again. But I shouldn't have called you, Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, you apologize to me? I said, I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said. He said, okay, closed a straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.
Raise your hand if you could follow any of that.
I could follow it a little bit, but here's the thing. I don't believe a darn word of it.
It's word salad, brothers. Word salad.
Yeah, don't believe a darn word of it. I don't know.
Here's a lifeguard down at the cement pond. And if you bounced off that diving board just the wrong way, you'd land right head first on the cement.
The guy is a blazing joke. Like, when it came to the election, he tried to declare himself that he was a minority group because he grew up Irish Catholic.
Well, I'll tell you this, boy. Biden better not be coming up here to Canada, because up here, the bad boys I run with, we don't get our razors rusty. We just use a rusty spoon. Yeah, because when we carve your heart out with a spoon, it hurts even more because it's dull.
Oh, I just couldn't even take it serious. I laughed.
Well, Biden didn't campaign anything. The media campaigned Biden. He just stayed in his basement the whole time. He is not up to the challenges of. He is not up to the challenges of doing anything about Ukraine. And mark my words, people, none of this stuff would have happened under Trump. Like, Trump would have put his foot down on this, and it would not have gone anywhere near this way.
Oh, and I forgot something that I had to say about Chrystia Freeland's decision to get tough with economic sanctions against them Russians. I think the Russians probably pulled all their money out anyway because the Canadian government imposed these measures to freeze bank accounts. So that by now they probably took all their money out of the Canadian banks and aren't interested in investing in Canada anymore anyhow. Because as I understand it, there's been a huge run on the banks domestically and internationally. And that, Chrystia Freeland, could take to the bank, except there ain't nothing left to take to the bank because everybody's taking their money out of the banks. And it's a bloody disaster. Because she went to war with Justin on her own people, targeting truckers, and freezing bank accounts, and overreaching. What a joke.
And so our fearless leader and the fearless leader of the United States of America are going to go toe-to-toe with Vladimir Putin.
He's going to go over there with a chain. He's going to go over there and meet Putin.
Well,
and he's going to tell him right to his face. He's going to say, Vladimir,
he's going to
I apologize. I don't apologize for throwing you out of Ukraine, but I apologize for what I said.
Justin's bringing his rusty straight blade. And his fancy socks.
Fancy socks. Now, we've seen what the White House had to say about this. We've seen what Justin Trudeau and his cronies had to say about this. There is a couple of excerpts out of Vladimir Putin's speech to the nation, which I think we should take a look at, because they're all saying this is all unprovoked behaviors. So I do have that pulled up if you want to bring it up. There's a paragraph or two that I have narrowed out here. Okay, so he goes, I'll begin with what I said in my address on February 21st, 2022. I spoke about our biggest concerns and worries and about fundamental threats which irresponsible Western politicians created for Russia consistently, rudely and unceremoniously from year to year. I'm referring to the eastward expansion of NATO, which is moving its military infrastructure ever closer to the Russian border. It is a fact that over the past 30 years, we have been patiently trying to come to an agreement with the leading NATO countries regarding the principles of equal and indivisible security in Europe. In response to our proposal, we invariably faced either cynical deception and lies or attempts at pressure and blackmail, while the North Atlantic Alliance continued to expand despite our protests and concern. Its military machine is moving and, as I said, is approaching our very border. Why is this happening? Where did this insolent manner of talking down from the height of their exceptionalism, infallibility, and all permissiveness come from? What is the explanation for this contemptuous and disdainful attitude to our interests and absolutely legitimate demands? So he pinpoints it there perfectly, I think, that this is not an unprovoked attack. This is the West and NATO, which the whole concept of NATO was contrived so that it can combat Russia. So is Russia concerned about this organization? I would certainly think that they would be. I would certainly think that it would be.
Of course they are. Of course he is. Like, NATO wants to set up right on Putin's front doorstep. And he doesn't want them there. And as I said, they had the opportunity to negotiate in a way that could have kept Ukraine a neutral country. But the narrative that's being spun through the media is something completely different. But when you're trying to justify your actions and justify war and condemn somebody that you're trying to pick a fight with, and I think that's my view. The media and the U.S. government and, in turn, Justin Trudeau, they're trying to portray Russia and Vladimir Putin as the aggressor. But the reality is, I think Putin feels threatened by NATO and the West. It's just too close to home for him. And that's why we're getting what we're getting. This was something that we brought upon ourselves, I think, in large part.
And we've kind of neglected the fact that we've done terrible diplomacy with Russia over the past few years. Like, it's been absolutely awful. I mean, Putin is by no means like a good guy. Has created or manufactured events so that he can go to war with different nations. He's a bit of a bully. There's a reason why he's been in power for so long. He's just not. But I would wager all the money in my pocket right now that if the West backed off on this whole NATO thing on Ukraine, that we would not be in this situation, or the Ukraine would not be in this situation at all. My biggest concern is that if he does take over Ukraine and he holds on to it, what's to stop him from keep going? Like, are we going to end up with another 1939 scenario?
Yeah, I have a video here, Brendan, I'm going to bring up if it's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it, please.
Yeah, this is a video comparing the military strength of NATO versus Russia. And, collectively, all the countries, belonging to NATO, obviously much bigger, right? And this doesn't tell the whole story strategically, though. But this is where the standoff is. This is where we're, this is the conflict in terms of, these are the numbers, if you will.
You might want to move the comment there. Is blocking off some of it.
The comment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. So yeah, it's the number 2 military power in the world. After the United States, Russia is the biggest superpower. Obviously, some of these numbers on the left are much bigger because it's like all the NATO countries combined, right?
Mm-hmm.
But look at
Yep.
the number of nuclear weapons.
He's
Russia
holding
has
his own
more.
there. He has
Oh,
more.
yeah.
It was
More.
bigger.
More nuclear warheads.
And I mean, when you look at how many are involved in NATO versus one country, even his military is quite large.
And don't forget that NATO has to spread its troops out over the world, right? To maintain what it's doing. So all these numbers can't be put up against Russia. Russia is very close to home. When you're talking about Ukraine, it's right there. So they don't need to. This is not like going to war against a smaller country or a country that is being propped up by Russia. This puts us in this. If this escalates, we would be in direct conflict with an adversary that I don't know honestly if we would be capable of dealing with it, because there's been so much incompetence. And this is the thing. Like, okay, I got a little silly, right, with the whole corn pop thing and and the mocking and that, but this is why, okay? Because this is crazy. And it makes me upset because these leaders that we have, they are putting our sons and daughters in harm's way. And it's our young people that will pay with their lives if this escalates. And it could be, and we're going to pay at home with higher prices for everything, higher prices for fuel because we're ill prepared for this. And they're actually putting, I think, the entire world at risk. We're endangering the future of the planet. You want to talk about the environment? If we get into a shooting war with Russia, it'll be something like the world has never seen before.
And I think there's one part of the equation that you're not going to hear in the mainstream media is how America and the West reacts to this. Is how China may react with Taiwan. Who's to even say that China could potentially go to Russia's rescue? Because China may be immensely uncomfortable with having Western powers potentially bombard Russia, which is quite close geographically. So Russia is in bed with China, and they are in bed with Iran, and they are in bed with Afghanistan. These are all people who are immensely pissed off at America and the West, and will gladly jump on any wagon train that Vladimir Putin invites them on.
Well, that's the other thing. By engaging with Russia in this manner, it spreads the United States and NATO very thin and weakens our ability to defend anything coming from the Chinese side.
Mm-hmm.
And China is actually the power, the world military power that I think the West needs to be more concerned about. And if we throw all of our resources at this, we're going to be ill prepared to handle the Chinese, and this is not good.
No, it absolutely isn't.
And again, like the numbers on the left are much bigger because you have multiple countries, but NATO is spread all over.
Oh, Carla's muted.
Oh, sorry.
She's
There we go.
talking.
Oops.
She's still muted.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
I mean, it's not even that great of a point, but I'm just saying, when you look at these numbers on the left, yes, you're right, Rick. They are from multiple countries. They're going to be tied up. We may just get auxiliary, pieces of this equipment, and he's got in his country like a significant amount.
Oh yeah.
Like it's I had no idea. Wow. I mean, I knew that Russia was powerful. I knew that, Russia and also Vladimir Putin, he's good at war. Period.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like these guys don't mess around, and
well, Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau, will call war on their own people. I don't know.
And look at that. They have NATO. Ukraine has Soviet era tanks still to this day.
Yeah.
That's equipment over 30 years old.
Well, and the nukes, that's what scares me.
We should all be terrified. I mean, I was so glad to wake up this morning and hear everybody talking about sanctions. I'm like, oh, geez, thank God. Because the way they were all talking, they were like, oh, we here in Canada have a supreme love of pierogies and would absolutely back the Ukraine up all the way.
Yeah, this is very, very, very dangerous. And it's not just about, the number of weapons you have. It's how you use them, how they're spread and distributed. It's about strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And Vladimir Putin is good at war.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
He's a cold and calculating person. Like
So
he
those were
doesn't care.
those were the numbers. Those are the numbers. And
he's the Chuck Norris of Russia.
And now we could take a moment to compare another aspect of the American military and why it may not be as effective against the Russian military.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems.
Sorry, Brenda, can you explain what this is before we get into it?
This here is a United States military recruitment ad.
Okay.
It begins in California with a little girl raised by two moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life, a sorority girl stereotype. Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women, but what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy. Another was climbing Mount Everest. I needed my own adventures, my own challenge. And after meeting with an Army recruiter, I found it. A way to prove my inner strength and maybe shatter some stereotypes along the way. I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone Lord, and I answered my calling.
So that's the stuff that the United States military wants to join their rank and file. Any thoughts before we compare it to what the Russians and their military are looking for in their army?
I'm not touching it.
Not touching it?
No, I don't have any comment.
All right. Let's take a look then at what Russia is looking for in their military. Here is a Russian recruitment video for comparison.
Это первый день твоей новой жизни. То, что было вчера, не имеет значения. То, кем ты был прежде, уже никого не волнует. Теперь важно то, кем ты будешь сегодня. Что ты знаешь о себе? На что ты способен? Вопросы могут остаться без ответов, но разве ты сможешь потом спокойно спать? Узнать себя, познать границы своих возможностей. К черту границы. Ты готов ломать себя до изнеможения. Каждый день здесь боль закаляет. Шрамы, повседневность. Это ты решил себе что-то доказать. Командир здесь только для того, чтобы ты мог увидеть в нем врага. Потому что без врага нет боя, а без боя нет победы. Но на самом деле, главный враг — это ты. Вчерашний ты. Твоя задача — выследить врага, догнать его, превзойти, стать лучше, чем он, и вернуться назад победителем. Потому что завтра первый день твоей новой жизни.
I don't think we need an English translation. I kind of get the point.
Yeah, I don't think we need an English translation either. It's come join the army, kick ass, and destroy our enemies. Look, the military is basically unchanging throughout time, in that there's specific traits that bring a military to be successful. And I don't think that first example is what brings a military to be successful. I highly doubt Russia gives a crap about how diverse their military is, or whether or not they need to bring in transgender people or anything like that. Like, these people are very serious about what they're doing, and they're not corrupted by woke ideology. They have one goal and one goal alone, and that's to be successful and to be deadly.
And focused. Mm-hmm.
Very focused. Very focused. They're not messing around by a long shot.
That was a good contrast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought so.
I guess the point is, one military is focused on politics, political correctness, and the other army is focused on creating an armed force that is lethal. Period.
Precisely.
Yeah. And that's why we should be worried.
Yeah.
We should be very worried. I don't know what the answer to any of this stuff is, and I kind of wish I had something more insightful to say about it, but
I just don't want a lot of people to die.
I don't want a lot of people to die either. And I think that after Russia occupies the area and they see all the Canadian weapons and goods that are there, it's not going to look pretty.
So that's where we're at tonight.
Yep.
And I think that what this has also revealed is actually how weak the U.S. is, and how all this rhetoric we've been hearing is just that. It's just a bunch of rhetoric from Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden. It's like they keep talking tough, and I don't like it, because they're not talking tough to some tin pot dictator. They're talking tough to the guy who commands and has control of the second largest military force in the world.
And he's got all the nukes.
Yeah, that's right. They're a superpower, just like the United States, and they have more nuclear warheads than the U.S., and they have supersonic missile technology to deliver it. If this thing gets out of hand, we don't want to be doing this.
No.
Not over this. Not for this. Not because of, not to defend a government that is, Ukraine is a country that has been high on the corruption scale for a long time.
Yes. They are number 73 in ranking in the world in human development and have rampant corruption and have since its inception. Ukraine has been basically a place that has been changed hands like 5 times in the past 125 years between the Ottoman Empire achieving their own independence, the Austria-Hungary Empire, and the Soviet Union, then again achieving independence. Like, this is just a place that has been taken over time and time again, and it falls apart after so long after certain periods of time of being left to their own devices.
Frank Frivolous says, send Christia. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good idea.
Let's send Christia Freeland over and Justin. Let's send both of them over, and they can lead the charge if we actually end up going to battle over there.
I don't think army socks are I don't think standard issue military socks will fit with Justin's lifestyle.
I don't know. It's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. I mean, we look and see Justin Trudeau. He can't handle his Canadians speaking truth, being angry with him. You know, how is he going to go toe to toe with Vladimir Putin? He hides when the Canadians come to him with an issue.
Yeah.
And he didn't like their words. So he got angry. This isn't a sandbox. I don't think Justin Trudeau is prepared for this.
So do we have anything else to really talk about on this front tonight, guys, or should we move on to the truckers thing?
Let's move on to the trucksters.
Yeah, let's keep on trucking.
Okay.
Boop, boop.
So the convoy continues in the U.S. Maybe I'll check to see what the live feed looks like on that front. There we go.
On Facebook that we started a pen pal convoy book in Ontario. Books headed to NS and AB. Love to send one your way if you're interested. Julie Wooten said on Facebook that everyone is different. We all have different opinions and different beliefs, but that doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't all pull together and support one another. Much love to all the truckers. Love you all from West Tennessee.
Very well said.
Very well said. Preston on YouTube said, watching from Virginia Beach, Virginia. God bless and safe travel. Well, thanks for rolling with us, Preston.
So we've got lots of trucks still rolling across the country. What are you thinking, Carla?
I think it's great. I love that this has come out from Canada, and I'm just going to go backwards with. I am concerned. I'm concerned about the fact that the U.S. that President Biden is waiting for them. My heart's a little bit heavy on that piece of it. But I love their spirit. I love that they picked up and that they've decided to do their own thing. I love that this is happening all over the world. Just as the world was watching, we knew. We watched it begin to flow. So, of course, I'm excited about that.
And
I think they may be more effective in some ways. I'm really wondering what it's going to be like when they land in D.C. I hope that they get the same opportunity to make the same peaceful point that we made without, being stopped right away.
What do you think, Brendan?
I think Washington, D.C. is a liberal hellhole. And when they get there, they're going to probably have a lot more distaste for the working class than Ottawa even did, I think. It's going to be incredible to see what happens. There's over 700 National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C. that have been set up to meet the truckers. America went straight from from considering a police action against them to using their National Guardsmen instead. I think this is going to still have an effect on America, and I think America will rally behind the People's Convoy.
And one day after we saw Justin Trudeau revoke the Emergencies Act, any more thoughts on why he did that? I think it's because the Senate was making it pretty clear they were not going to rubber stamp the legislation and were going to oppose it and not approve it. And rather than suffer the embarrassment of that, he decided to revoke it himself. And I think the story that we told last night helped illustrate one of the main reasons why. Any further discussion?
I agree 100% with that. I think that he knew that the Senate were asking very difficult questions. They wanted to know what the secret was. They wanted simply more than he could give. And he knew that they were going to vote against him, for sure. I'm with you 100%, Rick.
What
do you think, Brendan?
If that was the case, so he was definitely concerned about the Senate rejecting it because he would have to eat his own he'd have to eat his own garbage sandwich. That it would mean that what was the words that he used? That he would have had the Senate would have had no confidence in his government, and he would have to basically absolve Parliament and do a new election.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing if your fellow parliamentarians say that we don't have confidence in your government, but I don't think he would have been able to stomach it if the Senate said we don't have confidence in your government, which would have no power on Justin Trudeau, but he would just have to he would have to backtrack on his words really quick there.
There was a letter that was written, sort of an open letter, and I'm not going to share the person's name because they don't know that I'm going to read this. But I read this morning, and a man who wrote about his experience going to the Freedom Convoy demonstration protest in Ottawa. And he titled it, "Convoy, a wife's illusion of her country is shattered." Do you guys mind if I read this and share it?
Please read it.
He says, "I went to Ottawa the first week of the convoy. At first, my wife didn't want me to go, but I felt drawn to go. The pull was so strong I couldn't ignore it. Despite her clear concern about the safety, she agreed that if I felt that strongly, I should go. The drive from New Brunswick took 2 days, following the long line of trucks, slowing to a crawl at every overpass as people cheered and waved flags at us as we passed. As night fell, there was fireworks at many of the major meeting points. Nearly every overpass from Moncton to Ottawa was jammed with supporters. It filled us with hope and pride. The journey was long, but our hearts were full. Arriving in Ottawa was something I can't explain. The atmosphere was electric. So much hope, so much love. Everyone was cheering and dancing. Horns blared. It was loud, but in the best way imaginable. It sounded like freedom. We spent the night sharing smiles, hugs, and stories. Some were there because they had lost it all, while others were just there because, like me, they felt drawn. I am fortunate. I haven't lost my job. I've lost friends because of my views and can't go to many places, but I've not missed those places and made some of the best friends one could ever hope to find. I didn't come for me. I came for the truckers. I came to support those that infused hope into so many after 2 years of despair and loss. I spent 4 days in Ottawa. I walked the streets during the day and danced at night. It was a bit of freedom that I hadn't felt for so long. It was rejuvenating. It invigorated my soul. So much joy and so much kindness there. It was hard to leave, but I missed my wife and my home. After returning, I felt a longing for those feelings of freedom and those people. I convinced my wife to come back with me, and we planned it for as soon as possible. That was the 17th of February. Trudeau announced the emergency the Monday before, but after speaking to my friends who remained, they assured me it was still the same. We decided to still make the 13-hour drive. I was elated to be able to give my wife a taste of the freedom I had experienced. We arrived Thursday, and it was just as I remembered. Everyone was welcoming, sharing food, companionship, and hope. I'm glad she got to see this. Friday morning, I went for a walk. Things were calm and quiet. There was a bit of extra vehicles around, but it didn't seem out of sorts. I walked the streets and enjoyed a coffee and some good conversation. After a few hours of walking, I was ready to get back to the apartment we rented. As I turned a corner, I saw a drone and people heading in that direction. I followed and found loads of police forming in a group in one area. I thought this was just a show for Trudeau. Nothing is going to happen. I went to the apartment and asked my wife if she wanted to see it. She agreed. We walked our normal route and got to the crowd that was gathering. There were police in helmets and strange green uniforms. People were standing there talking to them, some praying. My wife is what I would call innocent, not one for confrontation, kind and caring. I was surprised she wanted to go stand right in front. I agreed, but said, if they move, we leave. She agreed. She stood close to the line. People were joining arms and praying. We joined arms, and the crowd sang the national anthem. My wife looked at these militant-looking men with their cold eyes and mostly hidden faces, and she cried. Is this real? Is this Canada? She said. I had no idea what to say. I just hugged her and said it will be okay. All of a sudden, I hear someone say, push! The green uniforms started to push forward, shouting at us to move. People are crowded behind us. We can't move. I see a line of men in yellow vests and black masks behind the green men. They are reaching through the green men. As the greens push, the yellow and blacks are grabbing and pulling people in. The pushing throws off your balance. Then the yellows behind use that to pull you in. A friend is a few feet over, and I see her vanish into the crowd of officers. I grab my wife and spin her around. I can feel the men pulling on my arms. I scream, let her out! And I see the crowd open behind. We get out. She collapses on the ground, weeping. I lift her up and take her away from the crowd. I tell her, we're going back to the apartment. She says, no, I need to see this. The officers stop pushing. Reluctantly, I say, okay, but we are staying back so we can escape if we need to. We see a woman pleading with other officers. These appear to be normal police. I can see one officer with bulging red eyes, and I can tell he's fighting back tears. The woman turns around, and tears are streaming down her face. I can't believe this is happening, she says in a broken voice. My wife and I surround her and just hold her. We all cry. I tell her it's time to go. I don't feel it's safe. She agrees, and we head away from the crowd. People begin to say the Lord's Prayer as we walk away. I drop her off to safety, and I head back to check on our friends. I feel better without her here. I return just in time to see horses moving through the crowd. Screams rip through the crowd. I see why. Several people lay on the ground as the horses pass. The varying uniforms gather them up, and they vanish. I find my friends. One was fine, and one had been detained, but released a few blocks away. She was fine, but bruised. We go back to the apartment and watch live streams in disbelief. We don't say much. The next day, my wife and I go for a walk. The area is blocked off well. We walk the perimeter, and police tell us where we can't go. We make our way to one spot where they let us in. We walk for a bit, but it seems dangerous, and the mood is not light. We go back the way we came. An officer stops us and says, "We can't go this way." He won't let us leave the area. "What are they doing?" I ask. "Why let us in but not let us out?" His response is, "With what is going on here, why would you come to Ottawa?" I start to get upset, and I'm not sure what I was saying, but my wife pulls me away and says, "Thank you to the officer. She is more reasonable than I, thank God." We finally find a way out by hopping a gate and crossing a frozen canal. I take her home. Later that night, I go out with friends, but leave my wife home. I feel safer that way. I need to see what is going on. We buy flowers. We want to try something. The plan is to give everyone on the front line flowers to diffuse the situation. Surely they won't beat people with flowers. We make our way back to the red zone. And to our surprise, it was no problem getting in. Almost like they want us in. The atmosphere is great. Dancing and music and people singing. The police are there, but seem to be nice and just holding their line. We lay the flowers at their feet and join the dancing. My wife sees us on a live stream and wants to come. We go get her as the atmosphere is amazing and no sign of hostility. Some of the officers even talk to the crowd. We return and people are dispersing. Smoke is in the air and people are wiping their eyes and holding their bruised bodies. The police were tear gassing, pepper spraying, and shooting people with rubber bullets. What a turn. I ran ahead to see what was going on. They had put up a 10-foot fence where we were, just dancing to Bryan Adams. We turned around and started to walk back. We found a parking lot full of people dancing and playing music from atop a truck with a stage built on top. We stay and dance a bit until more police arrive. They drag the people off the stage and arrest the DJ. We leave for the night and watch live streams. The officers kick them out of the parking lot. People dance on the streets for hours. Police don't do anything. It doesn't make any sense. Sunday, our last day here, my wife stays safe in the room. No more chances. I go for a walk. Everything for blocks is fenced with 10-foot fences. Nobody can get in. I ask an officer how it made sense that the claim was that the citizens were supposedly being kept from using the streets by the truckers, but the only time I couldn't walk anywhere I wanted was now that they showed up. She said, "Hopefully this will be over in a week." We spent the rest of the day in the room watching live streams. Our motivation is gone. On the long drive home, we talked about how we never thought this could happen in our country and listened to media lies about protesters shooting police with tear gas. We saw lots of tear gas and violence, but it never came from the protesters. They only sang and prayed as police brutalized them. We can't believe what we hear. It cannot be reconciled with what we saw with our own eyes. The Canada we knew is gone for now. I thought that was very
written.
cool. And yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, the Canada we
It
didn't
was
know is gone.
perfectly written.
And that's what you saw as well, right? When you were down there covering it? Carla?
Everything. It's what you saw when you went for walks with me on my lives, right?
Right.
Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Am I not there?
No, you're there. We can hear you.
I don't think she can hear us. though.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's exactly what I saw.
Yeah. And again,
I think that
I can now.
I think that the nation of Canada has been traumatized by Justin Trudeau and has been traumatized by our media. I don't know anybody who is on the opposite side of this.
Sorry, I don't know what you mean, Brendan. You don't know anybody who's on the opposite side of what?
I don't know anybody who buys the BS that they're spewing out about what happened in Ottawa. And I think that the violence that the police have committed against the citizens of this country has turned a lot of people off on the media-driven narrative that is out there.
I'm not sure if you're being accurate or clear, because I think that a lot of people do believe what the media is telling them. I think they are buying. There's still a lot of people who do believe that the protesters are a bunch of racists and violent, and they're insurrectionists, and we're a threat to the existence of Canada as a nation state. I think Justin Trudeau convinced them of that, and the media. And I think it's very dangerous what's gone on.
Well, we won't know now because society will be distracted by it.
Yeah, well, certainly distracted by this war in Ukraine. But yeah, Carla was down there for the better part of a month in Ottawa. If you want to support our journalism, we'd greatly appreciate it. We are fighting this information war, trying to combat what is clearly government propaganda being distributed by the legacy media, which is now bought and paid for by the Trudeau government. You can go to freedomreporters.com to support what we're doing. Look at all those people on the overpass there, just like it was in Canada. So this is the People's Convoy in the United States heading to Washington, D.C. Same scenario, people lining the highways, standing on overpasses, waving flags, cheering the truckers on. It's the same way the Canadian convoy started out. This one even larger because, of course, the United States is so much bigger. But again, just to wrap up what I was saying, there is a link to the donation page, a hot link in the YouTube and Facebook descriptions, or you can go straight to the domain freedomreporters.com. We'd greatly appreciate your support. We are going to be expanding our coverage here at Maverick News, and we have a lot more work to do because obviously we are in an information war.
Support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channels and selecting the bell for notifications, and that is also greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, helps us out a lot. That helps us too. Just even subscribing.
Mm-hmm.
That does help us.
Now, I think if you like, we could take a look at where James Topp is at.
Mm-hmm.
So James Topp is a Canadian military member who is currently marching to Ottawa from Vancouver, British Columbia, to Ottawa, Ontario, the capital of Canada. He is currently almost to Hope, British Columbia, and he's made some legway, pun intended, on his way there. So he's been sharing updates with people, and I think it would be a good idea to see where he's at with day 5 of his march.
Sure.
Give me one moment here.
And look at all those trucks on the lower left-hand corner streaming by. It gives you a little bit of a perspective. It's just like one after another after another.
Absolutely
huge
insane.
Convoy on its way to Washington, D.C. Also to protest the medical mandates in place in the U.S. And it isn't really clear what the strategy is. If they're just going to stay in Ottawa, block roads, not block roads. We're not sure how it's going to play out. Some speculation that there might be some activity at border points. I mean, we just don't know.
Well, hey, there has been many surprises out of the Canadian convoy and with what Canada was able to achieve. So buckle up, people. It's going to be a ride. And
so yeah,
here we go to
James Topp walking from Vancouver to Ottawa to protest COVID mandates in his own way.
And here he is on day 5.
Canadian
Good
veteran.
morning, everyone. It's the 24th of February. We're on day 5 of the March Across Canada. Here, reporting from Agassiz, BC. from here we're going to be going on, we're going to be heading down to Highway 7, and we're going to follow Highway 7 all the way into Hope. We're going to take a couple days there to regroup and reconfigure. If you're wanting to keep track of our progress, go to #Daily Route Updates. Thanks for your support. Thanks for stopping on the highway and giving me your encouragement. It means a lot to me, more than I can put into words. So, #Daily Route Updates, CanadaMarches.ca. I'm James Top, and I'll see you on the road.
And man, that's got to be a undertaking. I've known many people who have even traversed with bicycles from Vancouver to Nova Scotia and beyond. So this is a very dangerous trek along the Highway 17. It's got very heavy transport traffic. It's got very heavy automobile traffic. Basically, all the goods in Canada ship east to west and west to east on this highway. It can be quite small in some places. He's not only going to have that, but there's the possibility of running into wild animals on the road. When the weather warms up a little bit, he will be contending with the worst mosquitoes and black flies that you could ever imagine in your life.
Yeah, he's going to be facing a lot of challenges as he makes his way over the mountains and across the plains, for sure. And, he's actually in a little bit of trouble because when he made his first video, he wore his Canadian Forces uniform and expressed his opinions. And he's, I guess, sort of being investigated in a way over that, so I don't know where all that's going. But he's certainly inspiring a lot of people and picking up a lot of support along the way. So it's a great Canadian inspirational story from James Top, Canadian veteran, protesting Canada's current medical mandates. And as we've seen already, because of the convoys that rolled across Canada and converged on Ottawa and other points across the country, some points were scored by the truckers already because some provinces are now lifting their COVID mandates. And we've seen other actions as well that can only really, and if you're being honest, be attributed to the actions of the truckers. But tonight, Tamara Litch still remains in custody, if I'm not mistaken. Basically a political prisoner. Mm-hmm. And the only charges that she's facing the only charge is counseling to commit mischief. And she was, I think she's viewed at this point as sort of the main organizer by the government, or one of the main organizers, and that's the only charge that they've come up with. But they needed to implement, Justin Trudeau needed to implement the Emergencies Act in order to effect her arrest.
And it needs to be told and retold that the judge who denied her bail is in it with Justin Trudeau and had failed an election to become a Liberal Party member or member of Parliament. So I think that's worth noting. And I mean, I think that there could be some potential for some really bad lawsuits if it's determined that denying of bail here is unjust. So that will remain to be seen. And
so to clarify, the judge ran as a Liberal candidate with the support of Justin Trudeau. In order to get the candidacy, he had supported her, and she is now a judge. Yeah. And that's the judge who had the support of Justin Trudeau as a Liberal candidate who denied Tamara Litch bail.
Tamara Litch has not received her due process in any way, in any sense of the form. I mean, this is a misdemeanor. And you said it best last night, Rick. You said it was like her telling someone, go over there and paint some graffiti on the wall.
That's what the charge sort of amounts to, yeah.
Exactly. It's mischief. It's a misdemeanor. And I mean, she should have been given bail. There's no reason why she wasn't given bail. Truly, as far as organizing, is it not true that she was not just, but she was the person who started the GoFundMe in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely heinous that she is still in jail.
But see,
And
they
facing prison time.
The government sees the financial end of it, I think, as the biggest threat.
Exactly.
Because it was so effective, right? They raised over $10 million the first time. They froze that account and then, or convinced GoFundMe to, GoFundMe rather.
GoFundMe.
Yeah, GoFundMe. You know,
Well, they raised basically $20 million in just a couple of weeks.
Yep.
And they raised it from citizens from Canada and throughout the world. You know, a lot of Americans donated to that as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what they're saying. Oh, this is foreign influence in our politics and that we can't possibly have that. However, it's okay if Communist Party members from China fill Justin Trudeau's Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation's coffers. That's okay. But if it's a bunch of people who are trying to protest something I don't like, then we can't have that.
Oh, and let us not forget about the terrorists that, incidentally, Justin Trudeau paid $10 million to.
Omar Khadr.
Mm-hmm. And he was released.
Yeah.
For being a terrorist. Tamara Lich raised money to feed truckers so that they could peacefully protest, put up bouncing castles.
Yeah, I do believe Omar Khadr had actually killed an American sergeant and severely impaired one for the rest of his life as well.
I mean, let's put that in perspective. Her due process has not happened. It's absolutely illegal what they're doing to her.
Yeah,
And without his Emergencies Act, the main reason she was denied bail, according to the judge, is that she's not convinced that Tamara won't go back out and reoffend. Well, to protest, if Tamara Lich wants to go out and protest again over these mandates, it's perfectly legal. We are not under emergency orders. There is no reoffending. There's no crime.
yeah.
It's shameful.
You know, I see some comments from people over here, and I think from what I'm seeing, and I'm not going to put some of these up on the screen, because I think the reason that the truckers' protests in Canada were so successful is because they were entirely peaceful. And that's why there was so much support for it. And there continues to be so much support for it. Completely peaceful. It's despite all the spin that the legacy media kept trying to put on it, even though the government and the media, I think, were pushing, trying to get some sort of violent reaction through all of this, the protesters remained peaceful. It's the most incredible thing I've seen ever. I'm amazed that nobody got really out of line and started to hit back or fight back, even as the people were being beaten down with batons and weapons, shot at with rubber bullets, tear gas, pepper spray, trampled by horses. Unbelievable. And the people through it all, Carla, and you confirmed this, and we saw the raw video. How did they respond? They sang the national anthem. Sometimes they prayed.
Mm-hmm. They would yell freedom, that's what they did.
And look at those people on that overpass again. Look at that. That is amazing. And that's what we saw in Canada too. And we read that. I just read that letter. And, you think about it, the government the government stamped out people's national pride. The Justin Trudeau tried to snuff out people's hope. And he's still trying to do it. Then he stands up there today and says that he's going to stand against authoritarianism.
And you know what? That is egg on his face that is not reflecting well in the world at all. Because all across YouTube, people are playing clips of him where he says, "We are standing up against authoritarianism and Russia is a bully." They're playing that clip and they're making fun of him. They're like, "You literally have political prisoners in your jail right now. Like, this is ridiculous. Nobody's falling for it." Well, I'm not falling for it.
I can't wait for the videos. You know how people will play a little bit of his speech and then they'll throw a little something on the side. I can't wait for those to come out tomorrow.
Yeah.
They've already have been coming out. Already coming out.
That was tough to listen to. You know, I mean, his narcissism was shining.
Yeah. I hear that a lot about Justin Trudeau. Like, people say, "Oh, I can't listen to it without freaking out and throwing my phone," and et cetera, which probably isn't good for a good idea for our show to maybe keep playing him. It's probably bad for ratings, eh? But I mean, we have an obligation to show as many sides of the story as possible, and unfortunately, that also includes Justin Trudeau at the same time. So.
Sorry, Brandon, were you speaking to me?
I was just speaking in general.
Oh, yeah, I was
He
just
was just
distracted.
talking about our fearless leader. Fair and kind. He's so kind, so Canadian.
Fearless leader.
Fair.
Hey, he could take the weapons confiscated from the Coutts-Alberta border crossing, and he could take that on his journey with him to
the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Justin Trudeau, lock and loaded.
Black flags on his back. You know, the ones with the little red maple leaf on them? Some white writing of sorts? I'm not sure what it said.
What is that, Diagolon? The Diagolon badge?
You could maybe bring that flag as well.
Yeah.
I had someone ask me today if I would like to go and move to Diagolon. I said, no, it's looking good. I did. I got a message today. I'm interested. She was too.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I don't know. Do we want to explain what Diagolon is to people again?
No,
it's so complicated. I think we just move on.
It was pretty deep. It was amazing. It gave me a lot to think about last night. I went to a meeting after we finished, and I couldn't focus on the meeting because I was trying to unpack Diagolon.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say, if anybody's confused, you don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch last night's episode, because we laid out one of the reasons why Justin Trudeau's argument for using the Emergencies Act and having it extended sort of fell apart. And why I think the Senate was going to vote against it. But it's all explained in last night's video. Go check that out, because it's a story that just makes your head explode. And it's a story that you're not going to see in many other places. But I was disturbed, honestly, after doing it last night, because I went back and I found some mainstream media articles talking about all of it. Diagolon, Jeremy McKenzie, all of it. And the way that the story is being told was told in the mainstream media from that other perspective, it is like, it made me laugh and it made me fearful at the same time, because it's like, if you read it, if you're just an average person reading it without any of the background information or really knowing that the whole thing was based on a joke, it sounds very sinister and evil. But just go watch last night's episode. It's complicated. It's complicated.
Yep.
But that's the kind of story, about domestic terrorism that we brought people last night, that we'll be doing more of, and more field reporting as well. And we need your help because we are in an information war. And the story we told you last night about Diagolon and why Justin Trudeau, I think, was forced to revoke the Emergencies Act, the story that you're not being told any other place, but you'll find it in last night's broadcast. That's the kind of work we're doing here. And you can support that by going to freedomreporters.com. You can support our efforts to put more boots on the ground, if you will, journalistic boots on the ground out there fighting this information war, and help us cover the costs, the expenses of putting these broadcasts together every night. And we are making a difference because we also brought you that story last night of the bus driver, the school bus driver, who's being targeted just because she gave a donation to the truckers and expressed her support. And the restaurant owner in Ottawa, who also provided a donation and is now being targeted and persecuted by people who are anti-freedom. So we're going to bring you more of those kinds of stories. You can help us by going to freedomreporters.com. And we are expanding this news operation. And in the days and the weeks ahead, you're going to see this channel evolve into something that will be a little broader in focus, but always focused enough to bring you relevant stories of the day, and stories told in a way that you're not going to find anywhere else. And what we're doing, I know now, is more important than ever because my email has been just flooded with people bringing me stories, and some people just outright asking for help in order to get their message out because they need help, and they are being targeted simply because of
their belief.
Yeah, because that's right. Because they're exercising their right to say free speech, freedom of expression, and trying to exercise their other rights as well, which right now are under attack. So we're here to try and restore all of that. freedomreporters.com. You can also click the link in the YouTube description or on Facebook. And for those of you who have already donated, thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Furthermore, if you wish to support us in other ways, please be sure to like and subscribe to the video and hit the bell for notifications. That's also a very big help. Now, furthermore, Rick, do you think we should go into our next segment of how did we end up here?
Yeah, we can discuss that.
I have video ready to go, or
Sure.
if you have something else in mind, I'm open to that. But I do have our buddy Yuri up and ready to talk.
Okay, yeah. I mean, some people may have seen this, from the past, but yeah, let's let this roll and see where this takes us. The point of all of this is, how did we end up in this place with truckers being targeted, truckers being hunted down as Nazis? We've got this great Nazi hunt underway now, where Ottawa's interim police chief is saying that he's not going, even though the truckers have left, he's going to hunt them down and make them pay. We have a government that is still freezing bank accounts. Rights are still stripped away from us largely because of these medical mandates, even though the Emergencies Act or War Measures Act has been revoked now. Which its invocation was horrific to me because it really eliminated any rights that were left. But even with these medical mandates, it shows that we really don't have any rights. So How did we get here? What led to all of this? That's what we're going to discuss right now. And it starts a long time ago, years ago, decades ago. And Brendan, who is this that we're looking at here in this video?
This is Yuri Bezmenov. He is a former KGB spy who had defected the USSR. He came to Canada for a time, but was identified when he was working for CBC, and then he relocated to the United States, where he was essentially bring this stuff to everybody's attention. He has a lot of interesting insights as to how PSYOP operations worked with the USSR, and he explains in great detail about how those very things affect people like me, you, and Rick Walker, and Carla Olson. So without further ado...
Yeah, let her rip.
Yep. And I just need to step away for a quick second, so
Sure,
I'll let this
no
play
problem.
and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, It's what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all the schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in the United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking, but every second the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
Let's pull that out. Okay, so where do you want to take it from there, Brendan?
We are there.
What was that, Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to know where you wanted to take it after running that.
So there's a couple of things that he does point to. He talks about kind of the intellectual rot that has developed inside of our universities, that in our attempts to be more diversified and more equitable, we lose ourselves as a society. There's been so many examples, especially when he talks about you can show these people documents and you can show them this and that and they still won't believe you. And that's a big part of like how our media is operating. That we have what we've seen in Ottawa, perfectly peaceful protests. We had seen the media spin it and everything else, and we could still show people things from the on the ground perspective or Carla's perspective, and they still may not believe her. These these leftist ideologies are just really ultimately dangerous, and there's a big difference between what being a liberal was when you were younger, Rick, or when you were growing up, to what being a liberal is now.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna say some things that people aren't gonna want to hear.
Oh, please do.
But and the reason that people are not going to want to hear them is because people like a lot of their free stuff. And if you want to be free as an individual, you can't, how can I put this in a nutshell? You can't be owned and be free.
That's right.
And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I'll throw it over to you, Carla, to get some of your thoughts first.
Well, I mean, yeah, just trying to figure out, even when Brendan was talking about how liberals have changed, and that's the very thing that liberals have changed in, is they've become very comfortable in being owned and being told what to think, how to think, when to think. I feel like people, they get into this and they're no longer a free thinker, almost as though they become comfortable in this box where they don't have to critically think. They don't have any room to move. I mean, we're here, we're there.
Yeah, he also talked about
that beautifully.
Yeah, he also talked about demoralizing the nation, and all you have to do is think back just a short time ago to Justin Trudeau flying the flag at half staff for months to destroy national pride. That's just one of many things, right? The other thing they're doing to undermine national pride is to call a huge segment of the population racist, to characterize all of those people as fascist Nazis, Nazi truckers, create this villain, and to demonize the nation's past, to make it okay to tear down the history, both at the academic level and also in the physical world, by excusing people who tear down statues of prime ministers, and say that's okay, or we understand, because they were all a bunch of racists anyway, and we should be ashamed of them. They're making Canadians feel ashamed of their past, of their history. And it's, I believe, part of what Yuri just explained in that video from back in 1984. It's an attempt to demoralize the country and take it off course and tear it all down, burn it all down, really.
Well, truly, what year was it that they stopped singing "O Canada" in schools? When was that? Does anyone know?
I'm not sure.
They still sing "O Canada" in schools,
but they don't say the Lord's Prayer.
That's the Lord's Prayer. I thought they didn't sing "O Canada" in schools anymore.
No, they do.
Back in the 70s, we used to say the Lord's Prayer, and we used to sing "Kumbaya."
Kumbaya, for real?
Yeah, because at that time, that was at the end of the residential schools thing, and that's part of the story people don't tell. There was a lot of effort made at that time when I was a kid to bring the kids into our public school system, and so where I was going to school, we had quite a number of First Nations kids come when I was around. It was about grade, I don't know, probably about grade 3 or 4 when they started bringing them in, and from I can't remember what reserve it was, but it was around London, Ontario, and the efforts like that were being made, and so we would sing "Kumbaya." They started to teach a lot about First Nations history in the school system, and it was a different time. That's for sure. But that whole residential schools thing, we're only getting part of the story. Only the part of the story that makes everyone hate the country. We're not getting any of the story where people were starting to come together, and how things and the ongoing efforts at that time and even today that are being made to heal wounds and to bring communities together, right, and bring people together. And that's a whole other side of the story. There's so much effort just made to divide people, and that's what I think our government has been doing. That's what Justin Trudeau's been doing. That's what Jagmeet Singh has been doing. All they do is focus on the negative stuff, the bad stuff, the reasons why this group should hate that group and that group should hate that group, and it's a terrible thing, and this group should you know, pay penance and it's a terrible thing.
And
It's
those
all it's all about tearing the whole country down and tearing it apart, divide and conquer, and then I don't, once it's all destroyed, then I guess they get to build back better.
And that's what identity politics at its core does. It creates a huge rot. And anybody who thinks that what Yuri Bezmenov was saying there is BS, I have to remind everybody that they're still finding, to this day, Russian operatives from the USSR. And that in 2018 or something like that, there was a son born of a couple of operatives in Toronto where they were working, and then they further relocated to the United States, and the son won in a court battle his Canadian citizenship.
So how did we get here after all of that? Well, as the years have gone on, we've seen this left-wing woke ideology weave its way in through our school system. I remember when I was in elementary school, it was a sort of it was a different time. It was when these more progressive education philosophies and techniques began to come into play. Schools were we were in a quad system where they had open concepts with four different grades and four different corners, and they were trying all this crazy hippie kind of stuff, right? When I was going to school for the first time, and I remember in elementary school teachers teaching us about Mao's revolution in China and teaching us how it was a great thing that he had done. So some of the teachers, even then, as I think back, were communists or socialists, and they were bringing this ideology into the school system even at that time. And they talked about Mao's Little Red Book, and we were learning about all of this when I was just a little kid in elementary school. Well, fast forward to when I had kids, and my kids would come home, and they were no longer being taught. I went to a parent teacher meeting to find out. I had no idea. I found out that they weren't teaching spelling. But every day my kids would come home from school, and I'd say, well, what were you learning today? And it was always some social thing, some social engineering thing. That was always the focus of everything. My son won an award at the school for being, I don't know what it was. He was he was a friend of some other kid who was transgender. So the school made a big deal out of it. My son's friend would come over here. It was like no big deal to me. I didn't care. I never thought anything about it. But then one day my son comes home, they gave him an award because he was friends with because his best friend was transgender. I said, you got an award for that? Okay. So yeah, when he went over and it was like the end of the year and they gave him the award and everything. And I thought, okay, he got an award for being somebody's friend. But that's the kind of stuff that was going on at the schools. That became the focus of the studies, right? By the time my kids were going to school, they didn't care about spelling. They didn't care if they could learn to read and write properly. The focus was all this social stuff. Social stuff. Okay. I took social studies too. There's value in social studies, but at the expense of what? If that becomes the core focus. So things have changed in the school system. We're seeing it everywhere. But more than that, people, we've been turned into slaves through socialism. And that's why things, I think, in my view, have have deteriorated to the point where we're at. When you have 78 to 80% of the population that is in favor of or think they want socialism, to the point where now we have socialized medicine, half the population is getting some sort of a government check because they work for the government. You have a huge portion of the population on some sort of welfare. Corporations are on corporate welfare. Everybody's getting a handout of some kind. Everybody and every business, every institution. The only ones that really don't are small businesses. They get hammered. And we saw that all through COVID. But if you look at Ford, General Motors, the big tech companies, you name a corporation, Gillette, name me a company, McDonald's, any of them, all of the major broadcasters, all the media companies, construction companies, anything, any corporation, any big corporation, they're all on the public dole. Not only that, if you're a big corporation, you're being protected. You're being protected by government through regulation, which creates barriers to entry into your industry. Because they bought everybody in one way or another, through your health care, through a check that you get through CERB, through unemployment insurance, through a Canada pension, through something, right? Everybody's getting something all the way along the line. There's an election coming up in Ontario. Now it's a competition. Who's going to give the most free stuff away? Doug Ford says he's going to get rid of the license sticker, but there's the Liberals say they're going to buy everybody free snow tires. That's a real thing. I read that and I thought, free snow tires? Free snow tires? But that's where we're at. Well, that's fine. I don't want to get into the weeds on that one, but that to me creates a whole set of unforeseen reactions in the economy. The point is, everybody's on the dole. But when everybody's being paid off, now you're beholden to the government. Now you have to do what the government says. Because if you're General Motors and you don't do what the government says and you don't start building all electric cars by a certain date, you're not going to get any more government grants, but the other guys are. You're not going to get a tax break to build your next factory. You're not going to get a government assistance to help you meet your payroll on the contract you signed that you couldn't really afford because the union is asking so much money and that it doesn't make economic sense. And that's a real thing. I've seen that in media releases where car companies have negotiated contracts where they couldn't afford to pay the wages, so the government has had to top it up. I saw it here in my hometown at the old Navistar plant even years ago, where that they didn't want the place to close. It was controversial. The government tried to keep it here, and the government just injected millions of dollars, gave it to the company to keep them open. When you keep on propping up companies and paying people off and paying off companies, the companies do what the government wants, because if they don't, right? So it puts all the power in the government. So what we've ended up with is this strange hybrid economic system where it's sort of a mix. It's like a fascio-communistic hybrid economic model. That's what fascism is, really. It's the integration, the harmonization of government with big corporations. So you still have some free market, but the government controls those big companies because they're integrated. The corporations, the companies become arm's length appendages of government. That's what we have now with our media companies. That's what we have with all of our big corporations, every single one of them. And as a result, you see this progressive woke ideology and political culture weaving all through our society.
And not only that, you also see that specifically with the ESG score, which means Economic Social Governance score, which that's why the very reason we are seeing, I believe, Mars Candy Bar doing commercials like about little boys wearing dresses and stuff. And that's why we see gay pride flags on Bud Light. Bud Light doesn't give two craps of what you do in your bedroom. It's all about them trying to perceive themselves as being on the good guys. They don't care. They just want you to buy more beer. But if they don't have a good ESG score, then they're not going to be able to continue in the market and not receive government grants. And they're going to tie that in with a social credit system, and they already are. You can look it up on the internet. There's articles that say, what is your personal ESG score and how can you make it better? That's all
And-
It's all priming you. It's all priming you to be
Right.
a part of the government machine.
And here's what I'm going to say that people are going to struggle with. Our Achilles heel through all of this has been our socialized healthcare, our free healthcare. Why do I say that? Because it has left us with no choice. And it has given all of the power to government. As a result, when the government tells you you have to get an injection, you have to get an injection. Because if you don't, they've been telling people you don't deserve care. You're not even going to get care in some cases. Some doctors refusing to see patients. We know now, right now, there are people who need organ transplants who are being denied organ transplants because they, for whatever personal reason, can't or won't get the vaccine. So they're being denied care. It is at the point where they're being told, you get to die. We're going to let you die of a heart attack because we're not going to give you a heart transplant just because you won't take the injection. And because we have socialized healthcare and the patient's left with no other place to go. So you're held hostage. Now you're a slave. You cannot be owned and be free. And when they're paying you, when they're giving you all of these free things, you're paying for it with your freedom. And that's what people don't understand. And it's hard to see that. And when somebody's offering you something for free, or you think it's free, it's very enticing. The really sick part of it is they're buying you with your own money and enslaving you with your own money. And that's where we're at. And that's why it's difficult to get out of this. Because how do you get off the addiction? How do you get off that addiction of free stuff? And how do you get people to go in our society where universal socialized healthcare has become something of a sacred cow? How do you convince people that we need a new system that still provides care for people so that everyone can get care in a proper way, but doesn't restrict your freedom and gives you choice? That's just one example of how your freedom is restricted. And
I
that's...
think we've, go ahead. I think we've given up our choice, right? I mean, you've just outlined it beautifully, Rick, saying about, our socialization, socialization, of all of these different things. I mean, all of the free government handouts, our socialized healthcare, and we many Canadians sit here and say, the government, they need to remember they work for us, but actually they don't work for us. We work for them because we have bowed down and taken from them. They own us. We've allowed it.
That's an
The
excellent
government
point.
no longer works for us. We now work for the government because we owe them a payback for all that they have done for us. It's
Because
sad.
they're in absolute control. They've taken away all of our choice. They've enslaved us with our own tax money.
I mean, if you think in your personal life, I know many people will say, I'm not going to let that person, they're not going to help me because I refuse to owe them anything. I'm not letting them have that over me, but yet we've evolved into a society that accepts handouts, and we owe our government, and that's why they have so much power over us, just like you said.
And that's why Justin Trudeau sits there and says, you want me to come out and talk to you? I gave you free health care. I gave you free vaccines. I gave you all these things, and they're all wonderful things, and everybody says they want them. You voted for me. You voted for it. What are you doing here? Why are you honking your horns? You must be insurrectionists. You don't even understand. Because I'm certain that in his mind, he's being very philanthropic, charitable even. But people are saying, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. And he's saying, you don't have a choice. You either do it or you don't have a job. You either do it or you can't get on a plane or a train or go to a restaurant, because we're giving you free stuff. We're giving you free health care. If you don't do it, you don't get to participate in society, because we give you all the free stuff.
If you don't pay us back what we ask, then you do not receive.
And it's progressed to such a far point now. We're so socialized that we've basically outsourced so much of our life, so much of our safety, so much of our security. We've outsourced it all to the government. We've said, here, you take care of it. And now it's gotten to the point where it's literally, here, it's your responsibility, government, to take care of me and to take care of everyone around me. And so now it's become this battle, right? It's like this collectivist mentality where it's like, yeah, everybody's bought into this. We have socialized healthcare. Everybody has to do their part, right? And if you're not doing your part,
your freedoms end where mine begin, or whatever.
And all this crap. It's all this. The whole everything gets turned upside down. Now we're working for the government. Now I'm responsible for you, right? Brendan's responsible for everybody around him. Instead of, I'm responsible for me. I mind my own business. You're responsible for you. I'm not relying on. See, Carla, it's also the reason that happens is because we're all supposedly paying into the system. You paid your part. You paid for your health care, right? Brendan paid for his. I'm supposed to pay for mine now too. We're all supposed to contribute for the greater good. We pool our money together through the taxation system. Then we all outsource it all to the government, and they're supposed to take care of us all. And now if you've got some crazy outlier who doesn't want to participate, now he's a crazy guy. What the hell's the matter with that guy? Like, we're all doing this, and he wants a choice. No, he doesn't get a heart. He doesn't get his heart transplant. He's a bad dude.
It was very easy for them to control Canadians on that way, because all you have to do is tune into Cross Country Checkup on CBC Radio Sunday afternoon. When you do that, the producer of the show screens all the calls, and they only put in the calls that they want to hear. And so it's all a bunch of people saying everybody who isn't vaccinated needs to be rotted out into a tent and left to die, or sent home and left to die. Like, Carla, you were a nurse. Like, you could elaborate on this. Like,
well, I mean, I think I was fired before this big thing where they were refusing to treat, like before they ever said about the organ donation, any of that. I was fired before that. But I mean, yeah, it's terrible the way I mean, well, look at I don't think I should comment. To be honest, I don't think I can be correct. I'm a little hot from the conversation.
Well, let me tell you all a story. My grandfather, he owned and operated a bar in Northern Ontario for basically 50 years or so. Now, or wait, probably better on 30. Anyhow, he worked in that bar all that time and never once accepted a tip. And he didn't want somebody's free money because he never wanted to be beholden to them. If he takes that money, he owes that other guy. That's not how he wanted to operate his life. It's not how he wanted this country to be operated. And I think that's a big difference between what the last generation was all about and what we have going on now. So there's some interesting.
Well, I think there was just more honor.
More what?
More honor in things, you know.
Yeah, I suppose. Definitely more iron.
Because
like
people worked harder. People did more for themselves. You know, this society, this generation, including even my own, is very quick to ask for that handout as we're talking. You know, not worrying about owing people. I don't know. Okay, so we know the problem. How do we solve it?
Well, that is the challenge, right? So you have all these truckers down there who did what they did. We've had people out protesting. but there has to be a solution to the problem. And the other thing is, the government really today isn't really living up to their end of the bargain either. And that's a big part of this problem. They're telling us they are, but the healthcare system is inadequate. They don't have enough capacity. That's why they were afraid the hospitals might be overrun, because they'd never had enough capacity to begin with. They don't tell you that, but I think that's a big part of the problem.
Never had the staff, never had the ability. Working short was not a new thing.
Yeah.
And
even through all of this, as they were handing out billions of dollars to companies and people and just sprinkling money all over the place, and even as they send money, as Justin Trudeau sends hundreds of millions of dollars overseas to other countries, have they invested in the healthcare system at all to address these capacity issues? No. So they're not really living up to their end of the bargain, and that's another reason people are upset. And through these protests, these problems and concerns are not articulated in a refined way, because people are too busy living their lives and going to work. They just know there's a problem, and they're seeing how it affects them on a personal level. But they can't go to Ottawa, park their rigs out in front, and then provide a clear, concise explanation to even a reporter on the street who's asking them, "Why are you here?" "I'm here for freedom," right? It comes down to that. So it's a very blunt message, but you have to have a good leader, a smart leader, a mature leader in place who's willing to listen to the people so that he can figure out what those concerns are. And we don't have that in the Prime Minister.
No,
but we need someone who can take us down that road and help us find those solutions. We need a bunch of leaders who can help us do that.
Yeah, big time. Big time. We're in a sad state of affairs here because we don't have the leadership at this point that is going to be adequate. They're all more interested in towing their own party lines than they are interested in bringing stability to our society and making things work. And the point about being a leader isn't just about giving people what they ask for. It's also about having the farsightedness to see ahead and understand the intended consequences of legislation and the unintended consequences of legislation. And that's a big thing. That's hard to come across because, nobody has a crystal ball, and, nobody's going to govern perfectly ever.
Well, not just legislation, but government programs, social programs. Anytime government implements any kind of a program, especially a social program, there are always unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It has effects that you don't foresee. Case in point, free snow tires. Or if they pay for half the cost or price of snow tires, that's instantly skews the market, right? We can go down that road, but I don't want to get too deep into that. But if you start offering up free snow tires, what do people, and it's not even equally applied, then what do people do? They end up buying snow tires and running them all year round in the summer and the winter. Now it's not just for the snow anymore. Now you're going to create more demand for snow tires and a lot less demand for all season tires. That's just one thing that government program would do. I ran snow tires on my car all year round last year just because I didn't get around to changing them. But you can run them all year round, and that's what people would do because it would be a lot less expensive.
That's true.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Carla. Your microphone is muted, or you don't have any audio.
She switched to her headset.
Mm-hmm.
So she needs to go to her settings and switch the audio to headset.
Yeah. So it's the same with any kind of a government program. and not just for people, but also for big corporations as well. Take electric cars as an example. And, I'm an automotive journalist, right?
Mhm.
So I'm watching this unfold. Electric cars are selling not because there was big consumer demand for them, and they're still not even really selling that well. They're making inroads into the economy because the government is incentivizing them, subsidizing them, is subsidizing the production of them, mandating the production of them, and telling corporations, car companies, if you don't, you must. If you're not going to get these grants, you're not going to get this, you're not going to get that. But the really dark side of this is that in the end, this always leads to coercion, the use of force. And we saw that in Ottawa with people being beaten in the streets. Because when you have government redistributing wealth, trying to provide free stuff for everyone, they also engage in the act of taxation and the extraction of wealth from people so that they can redistribute it. And they also want compliance to all of these programs. And if you deviate from that, they enact enforcement. And as we've seen throughout history, socialism leads to communism, leads to violence. And people may not want to recognize that or acknowledge it, but we saw it in the streets this past week in Ottawa. That is what you get. You bring in these kinds of ideologies, you bring in these mandates, you bring in mandates, you bring in this is where it leads. This is what you get. And that's why the whole thing down there in Ottawa, the whole thing with these truckers, it's not just about medical mandates. This has become literally a struggle between freedom and this fascistic communism that we're seeing, this hybrid system that is being implemented in Canada. And in that respect, it's also good versus evil, because the government, these socialist governments, also set themselves up as a religion. They don't want God involved in government at all. They want that separated from your Constitution. They want to destroy the church because individual rights come from the supremacy of God as written in the Charter and in the Constitution. It's those lines right at the very beginning of those documents that reference the supremacy of God. People think that's about religion, but it's really not just about religion. It's really a reference to your rights coming from a higher place. Individual rights. Your rights as an individual are enshrined in the Constitution and guaranteed in the Constitution and the Charter. But they don't come from Justin Trudeau or the government. They come from a higher place. You don't have to believe in God in order to have those rights. That's why it's not just a religious thing. It's really more a reference to you are born with these inalienable rights. And if you're a socialist and you believe in collectivism instead of the rights of the individual, you want that wiped away. And that's why we also see this war on the church, the war on Christianity. That's why our churches have been burning and our politicians stand there and say, I can kind of understand it, because they're in favor of it. And that is why this has become also a battle of good versus evil, if you will, light versus darkness, communism versus Christianity. That's why I always heard through history, as a kid growing up, those godless communists. It's true. They don't believe in God. They think God is a fictitious thing, and they and that rights are an illusion. Rights, in their minds, are the only rights you have are the ones that the government gives you. And that clearly is what Justin Trudeau believes, whether he has the Emergencies Act in place or not. And that's, in a collectivist society, that's what you get. And that's where we're at right now. And that's why you see this huge divide as well, because now you have all these people on this side who have been taught that we need a collectivist society, a socialist society, and over here all these other people still kind of entrenched in the past, people like myself who go, well, wait a minute, what about my rights? And that's why you see people on the street saying, oh, screw your rights. You don't have any rights. Your rights end where my rights begin.
Whenever somebody says that, I get sick in the stomach.
Like, wait a minute. What does that even mean? Do you even know what you're saying?
I don't think they do. I don't think they do.
It's just a catchphrase, and they don't even understand what it means. It's
exactly.
It's more doublespeak.
It is doublespeak, and it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Like even unpack it. What does it mean?
Your rights end where my rights begin. Well, okay. Yeah. That's right. I guess you agree with me then. You mind your own business and I'll mind mine.
Exactly.
We're on the same page then, but that's not really what they mean. They mean that, we're in this new collectivist socialist society, and if you're not part of it, screw you.
That's right.
You don't get to participate, asshole. Right? You don't get a heart transplant. You can't even come in the restaurant. Because you're not part of the team.
You didn't do your part.
That's right. That's right. And on the other people on the other side of the fence are like, well, wait a minute. Why don't you just mind your own damn business? You go do what you want, and I'll go do what I want. I want to go to McDonald's. You want to go? No, fine. I'm going. But they're like, no, you got to do that, or you don't get to do this. So it's a mindset. It's an ideology, and it's collectivism versus individuality, individual rights.
And if you don't believe us, all you have to do is look at the instance where our parliament had the discussion on a roadmap to exit the pandemic, and that discussion was very clearly, do we want to have a Canada that is individual rights, or do we want to have a Canada that is collectivist rights? And they lay it out for you in black and white, and any vote for NDP or for the Liberal Party of Canada at this point is a vote for handouts and basically the attempt to not hurt anybody's feelings.
Well, Miss Jen SK1, she says, go free speech. But, in a collectivist society, now that we've gotten to the point where we're at, free speech doesn't even count for anything anymore. You're not even allowed to have free speech and if you believe in collectivism, even free speech gets squashed and wiped out because you can't challenge it. They don't want that challenged. Otherwise, you're not part of the team. They can't afford to have it challenged. Free speech is part of being an individual. All of your rights eventually are given up, and the government can't afford to have people challenging them through free speech. And they're basically buying off everyone saying, don't challenge me. I'll pay. Well, we're going to give you this free stuff. You vote for me. We're going to give you this free stuff. You support me. If you're challenging me, you're not supporting me, so I'm not giving you your free stuff. That's what we've got. And that's right. Free speech gets you locked up because as it moves along, the government has to enforce all of this. They have to take your assets. They need to, because you don't even have property rights anymore. And when things fail under socialism, government can't admit that they failed because then that would look like they're not living up to their end of the bargain. They can't admit that the healthcare system is inadequate, that they don't have enough capacity, so they have to blame it on someone. Who are they going to blame it on? The unvaccinated. That's why. So a friend of mine called me up the other day, and he's vaccinated, of course, but he didn't get his freedoms back the way that he said, or they told him he would. And so on the phone, he said, Rick, I'm really frustrated and angry with all of the unvaccinated people because they're the reason I can't go to the gym. The gyms are still locked down. Now, this was a while back, right? I said, what do you mean? Well, because they're not vaccinated, they're the reason that this whole COVID thing is still going on, and that's why I can't go to the gym. It's their fault. So screw them. And he's pissed off at the unvaccinated people. And in his mind, he can't go to the gym because there are people out there who didn't get vaccinated and they're all running around, congregating, spreading the disease. I didn't get into it with him. But here's the reality. The unvaccinated are really just being used as a scapegoat by government. They're not the reason he can't go to the gym. He can't go to the gym because the government is preventing him from going to the gym with mandates. They decided that he can't go to the gym, and they made a law that prevents the gym owner from allowing him to go to the gym. And they've made the gym owner the enforcer. So now they've pitted the gym owner and the gym customer against each other. He wants to go to the gym, but he won't let him. So now it's like, well, if he comes, I got to report this guy to the police and get him charged. And if that guy does open, then this other person is going to report that guy to the cops to get him charged. But the real problem is the unvaccinated people. That's why the gym's not open.
It all boils back to the Great Divide. That's what's been going on for the last 2 years, 3 years almost.
It's identity politics. You have to just look at the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks that said, oh, look at all these rich farmers. I mean, Russia essentially had just gotten out of peasantry for a generation or two, and if you were doing okay, maybe you could have a small farm and a cow and a pig or something of that nature. But the Bolsheviks went and said, oh, look at these fat farmers up here. They're sitting up there on their high horses, and they got all the food and all the stuff, and you got nothing. And boy, oh boy, people fell for it. They fell for it hard. In fact, it led to a series of big famines in Russia and Eastern Europe because they went in and they took all their stuff. But now that none of the farmers had an incentive to innovate anymore. And so people starved to death. And that's exactly what Rick was just describing. That's exactly what he was just describing. The identity politics, saying, look at them, they have everything. Well, we have nothing. That's dangerous.
So what's the solution? We need a lot of solutions in a lot of different institutions. The court system, the political system, our corporations, our schools, everything. Everything needs to be revamped at this point.
Yeah.
And through all of it in our healthcare system, we need to inject choice. We need to inject individual rights again so that the government has less control over us. And we have more control over our own destiny. But with that comes less free stuff and more personal responsibility.
And are people going to do that? Do people really want that? I mean, I know people who, when we just talk on vaccination, okay, I know people, and the election, let's talk about the election. So the last election, I know someone who would normally vote conservative, but because the Liberals came out with, hey, we're going to make it easier for people to buy homes. There are too many people in that 30 to 40 generation that cannot buy homes, who are stuck in the renting cycle. And his goal was he was going to make home buying more affordable and make it more doable. She voted Liberal because she can't buy a home.
Right.
So are people willing to give that up in exchange for the freedom of choice?
and see what the government will also do in order to wrap power around itself, is they'll even do things to make things unaffordable for people so that they can then ride in and provide a solution.
Yeah, on their horse.
Right. And here I've got the solution to the problem we created over here. So you're just going to have to vote for me and give up your choice and your rights. But you see, if we can inject choice again, and if people can accept some responsibility again for their lives, then we get our freedoms back. But I don't think we will ever actually truly get our freedoms back until we do those things and get less government, more choice. But in the end, we have to do more to take care of ourselves. And actually, that's the most selfless thing you can do. It's the opposite of what people who want heavy socialism always accuse the other side of, where they'll say, you're so selfish. Why don't you just do this because, get that shot, or do this thing, because they think that socialism is philanthropy. It's like, it's kindness, it's sharing. But in reality, the most selfless thing someone can do is to take care of themselves. Because if I take care of myself, Carla, I don't need you to take care of me.
That's right.
I don't need the government to take care of me. I don't need Brendan to do anything. I don't need anyone. Mm-hmm. And if I can take care of myself first and take care of my family, then I might even be able to help take care of someone else who's actually unable to take care of themselves. And a long time ago, that's sort of what the churches were for too.
I was just going to say that's biblical, what you're saying. That's the way the early church functioned.
That's what those institutions were there for, largely. Charity, true charity. Communities that took care of each other.
Community.
And we even saw that in Ottawa.
I was just going to say, and that's what made Ottawa so beautiful, is that it was community. People were, and people were pulling their resources and their gifts and talents together to, like, I literally began to call Wellington Street Fringe City, right? Because we were the fringe minority. So it was Fringe City because in those 3 weeks, they created such a community. I mean, we had the people who were shoveling. We had our own garbage people. We had, we had restaurants, free restaurants where we were cooking meals. We had the local church was there. There was always somewhere you could go. Adopt a trucker. Like, we had everything except a government. Really.
And that's a good point, because those kinds of community supports, are the same kinds of community supports that our country was founded on. And they're natural. They come naturally to people because people do want to help each other. And they know that even though I'm taking care of myself and my family first, it's also in my best interests to make sure that the people in my community are taken care of, so that we have a great place to live, a safe place to live, and so that everyone is taken care of, because it's not in my best interests to have somebody starving next door and dying, right? Or suffering. We don't want that.
Right.
Well, let's be adamantly clear here. We're not saying that by doing this that you're going to abolish all suffering. That, just like the Buddha says, existence is suffering. And that's life for you. There's not a single political model, in which everybody is that nobody will be left behind. So somebody's always going to be left behind. It happens in life. It happens in the wild. It happens in nature. Nothing's perfect.
No, but there are a lot of reasons for that. And
well, I'm just saying,
we know that.
I'm just making a point.
But in the that whole thing in Ottawa was, in a way, an experiment in and of itself, a social experiment. And what I saw there, you saw it firsthand because you were right there reporting on it, Carla. You saw a community form. You saw,
and quickly.
And you saw these social problems dealt with handily. The homeless had never been so well fed as we know.
The homeless
regardless of
were
what
part
the
of the community.
Right.
We ate dinner with the homeless. You know, the protesters fed the homeless, but also sat them down at their table, so to speak, danced with them in their dance parties. You wouldn't be able to go through that area and really know who was homeless, who was not. People were not identified in those kinds of ways.
And
we were all Canadian. Everybody was Canadian. Everybody was in unity, and everyone was there for the same purpose, and that was just to make change.
To just finish on my point there, that nothing's perfect, but our institutions have been established to the point where things are better now than they've ever been before. Ever. There's less poverty, there's less war, there's less everything. No matter if things look bad right now, but still, things have been established in a way that they're better than they would have. The numbers are better all around. We have the ability to turn this around, I think, eventually, but...
Well, just to backtrack a bit, I think that one of the reasons Justin Trudeau ran away, and he probably doesn't have the intellectual depth to have understood or to have seen what I'm about to say. The truckers embarrassed him. All the people who went down there and were participating in this social experiment embarrassed him. It embarrassed the government. Because if you think about it, they took care of a lot of these problems that the government hasn't been able to take care of. Every time I've been to Ottawa and I walk around in the downtown area, I see homeless people literally laying on the streets there under the shadow of the looming Parliament buildings. That close. A social problem, of a homeless problem, with drug addicts and all these different issues that our Liberal government has been unable to address in an effective way. But the truckers roll into town, and what did you guys do? You fed the homeless. You took care of them. Crime was down 90%. Those are municipal statistics.
Yes, truly. We had our own sort of pseudo police force, right? Everyone was watching out for everyone else. I was there most of the time on my own, you know, and I was not afraid. I never felt that I was at danger. I knew someone would always have my back.
So the government couldn't have that. They couldn't have you guys showing them up, and they wouldn't. Maybe they aren't able to really kind of wrap their head around it, but they felt like you were mocking them. I'm sure of it. Those guys are down there in a hot tub.
They were on the bouncy castles.
What is that? That
dancing in the street in front of Parliament,
waving flags, and feeding the homeless. And think about this too. Why did they? The first time I saw Pastor Artur Pawlowski arrested, you know what he was doing? Feeding the homeless.
Exactly.
Which they made illegal. We have a really serious problem, folks. The government is selling you socialism, but they haven't been living up to their end of the bargain. And that is why people are protesting. And anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, anything that embarrasses them, they deem to be illegal. It's not just protesting that they made illegal and free speech. They literally made it illegal to feed the homeless. And when the truckers went to Ottawa, they embarrassed the government on all those levels. And all those social problems, literally for the better part of a month, were addressed and taken care of because it was done in an organic, natural way.
Mental health, too. I mean, we know that that's a huge problem in this country. People were declaring themselves healed of mental health issues that they'd had that have, that have happened because of COVID and over the last 2.5 years. They couldn't get help. They were depressed, loss of job, loss of family, broken relationships. They came there and they were healed. The government has been saying, that they were going to reach out and help with the mental health, and they've been, that's been a big talk. They weren't able to do it, but in 3 weeks the truckers did it.
And so you asked, what's the solution to the problems that we're facing right now? I would submit, take a look at how that protest was run and see how that community was set up. If it can be solved there, it can be solved on a larger scale. I don't have all the answers. It's much more complex when you're trying to apply these things across a nation, right? But for almost a month, you guys went down there and you solved those problems.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Indescribable. Wow. I mean, everyone was just accepting of everyone. There was one big key thing. There was no vaccination status. It was not vaxxed against unvaxxed.
Yeah.
It was people reaching for the same goal, which was to end the mandates.
I just had a funny thought there. You didn't see a pop-up vaccination clinic down there, did you?
No, nor did we see an outbreak, COVID-19 outbreak.
Right. So
I think the best way we could wrap this up here at this point is to quote Ronald Reagan. He's like, the scariest words that you could ever hear. We are from the government and we're here to help.
Aha.
Is that what the police said when they showed up in the riot gear?
I don't know. Ronald Reagan said it.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know, but it seemed like that was the message from police. Well, we're gonna go down there and we're gonna help.
Yeah.
Okay, get out your nightsticks and tear gas, boys.
And your LRAD.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that I know what an LRAD is. That's something I could have went the rest of my life without knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, I'll say just that's how we got there. That's how we got here. In my view. What do you guys think as we kind of closing comments on all of that tonight?
Life is complicated. Work hard. Keep an eye out on the dangers. And, Carla says it better than I do, but, be kind, be Canadian.
Yeah. That says so many things, Just, I think that people need to not lose hope. And, you know what? Listen to some of the things we discussed here tonight were kind of enlightening. You simplified the solution. And the solution really is to just form community, stay unified, and be kind and be Canadian. Absolutely. I know it seems so simple, but truly that's what I saw, is people forming community and helping one another. I think they were so desperate to be in a place where there was no division.
Yeah.
We
got to find a way to bring it all back in a positive way. And
if we can remove this division, it will change a lot of things, I think.
Yeah. I sure hope so. And you guys can help us as we wrap up tonight by going to freedomreporters.com to donate. We'd greatly appreciate it. We can't do this without you. You'll see that in the days and weeks ahead, this channel is going to shift a little bit and change to broaden our focus and bring you more stories on a broader range of issues, not just the truckers' convoys, but we will, of course, be providing updates on that People's Convoy in the U.S. We're going to be following that closely and following everything that's going on here in Canada as well, on the freedom front, I guess, overall. So freedomreporters.com is how you can support us. You've already made a big difference. This is an information war as we try to, through the new journalism that we're practicing, restore freedom in our country and restore our country. There's also a hot link in the YouTube and Facebook descriptions, and I'll throw it over to Brendan to remind you to subscribe.
Please like and subscribe our video and ring the bell for notifications. My name is Brendan Kennedy, the co-host for Maverick News. Thank you.
And my name is Carla Olson. I guess I'm not on the ground in Ottawa. I have to come up with something else. So
Yeah, tonight anyway.
Yeah, tonight I'm not. Anyway, I am Carla Olson, and I just want to remind you to not be part of the divide and be kind, be Canadian.
All right, and I'm Rick Walker with Maverick News and Maverick Multimedia. Thanking you all for watching, and we will be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with more live coverage of the People's Convoy, the aftermath, and possible new developments with the Freedom Convoy in Canada and other issues, including the war in Ukraine. Thank you again, all. Catch you all tomorrow night on the flip side.